got a long night, I'm afraid, and we've got people. So, thank you. 7:08, I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Village Board to order. Clerk Waters, would you please take the roll?
Trustee Eater,
Here.
Trustee Enyia,
Here.
Trustee Leving-Jacobson. Here. Trustee Straw,
Here.
Trustee Taglia,
Here.
Trustee Wesley,
Here.
President Skaman.
Here. Perfect. And Trustee Leving-Jacobson is participating remotely today for our protocols as, I forget what illness. Thank you. And entertain a motion to approve the agenda. We'll be moving item H from regular to consent, or from consent to regular.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Trustee Eater and seconded by Trustee Wesley. Clerk, what? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we're moving to non-agenda public comment. I have one, and then Clerk Waters, if you have any that have emailed in or who have notified you, please let me know. Macy, go ahead and join us, and thank you for being here.
Hello.
Supposed to start the timer now.
Can you stay within 3 minutes, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you all for having me. My name is Macy Makerzak. I'm a resident of Oak Park over on Gunderson, right by Mays Hospital, or Mays Library. And I'm here on behalf of Oak Park Climate Action Network today. I'd like to give a public comment on the item on your agenda regarding the gas blower ban. So on behalf of OPCAN, first and foremost, we'd like to say that we abhor the intrusion of ICE in our communities and their inhumane disruption of life and disregard for constitutional rights of humans. Secondly, the Village Oak Park Leaf Blower Ordinance is a separate issue from the ICE intrusion in West Cook County. We have always supported the gas-powered leaf blower ban with a comprehensive education and outreach effort at landscaping company owners and their staff. The village requires the village staff on the blocks talking to workers during heavy cleanup time, which is happening right now. Backing away from enforcement in a public way sets a precedent that we do not support. There has been a very long lead time to full implementation of this ordinance, and we do not advocate for a longer timeline. I'm here tonight to say to uphold the ban that we have in place, and I encourage residents to be working with companies on this behalf, not focusing on individuals that work for them. Thank you for having me today. I think I hit 3 minutes, under 3 minutes. Have a good day.
Fantastic job. Thank you for joining us. Anyone else wish to give non-agenda public comment this evening? Okay, very good. So then we'll move to proclamations, and we have 3 proclamations this evening. First, a motion to approve a proclamation declaring Ageism Awareness Day on October 9th of 2025. Motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. And I've asked Jenna Leving-Jacobson if she would please read this aloud for us.
Ageism Awareness Day, October 9th, 2025. Whereas ageism refers to the stereotypes, how we think, prejudice, how we feel, and discrimination, how we act, toward others based on age. And whereas ageism affects younger and older people, and whereas ageism toward older people affects their health, their longevity, and their financial well-being, as well as the economy of the Village of Oak Park. And whereas recognizing that it is up to all of us to ensure that people of all ages and backgrounds and abilities are respected and portrayed as capable, competent, effective, and valued in all areas of society. And whereas raising anti-ageism awareness and preventing ageism is beneficial to all citizens and residents of the Village of Oak Park by improving livability and the quality of life within Oak Park. Now, therefore, I, Jenna Leving Jacobson, on behalf of Vicki Skaman, President of the Village of Oak Park and the Board of Trustees, do hereby proclaim the Village of Oak Park shall recognize Ageism Awareness Day on Thursday, October 9th, 2025.
Thank you. And I believe we have Mark Blessoff, the Chair of the Aging in Communities Commission. Would you like to join us?
Yes. Okay.
It's the only way people can hear us at home.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us.
Hi, greetings to the board and Village Manager Jackson. Thank you for your support. The commission looks forward to working with the village board and with village staff over this next year to continue to raise consciousness and implement policy regarding ageism, probably the last acceptable prejudice, but it's getting less and less acceptable. So thank you for that, and that's why I'm here to say thank you.
All right. Well, we very much appreciate your leadership on the commission and bringing this important awareness to our attention, particularly in collaboration with any of our other commissions and the work that we do here at the board.
Okay,
And with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve a proclamation declaring Monday, October 13th of 2025 as Indigenous Peoples' Day in Oak Park. Motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Ooh, motion by Trustee Eater, seconded by Trustee Wesley. And if Trustee Enyia, will you please read this aloud for us?
Indigenous Peoples' Day, October 13th, 2025. Whereas the Village of Oak Park recognizes the indigenous people of the lands which would later become known as the Americas have occupied these lands since ancient times, and whereas the Village of Oak Park, in alignment with its diversity, equity, and inclusion statement, reverently recognizes that the land on which we live, learn, play, and work was first the original homeland of numerous native nations. These sovereign indigenous tribes were unjustly displaced from their ancestral lands through colonial force and systemic removal. We acknowledge this painful history as a necessary foundation for our ongoing work to build a more inclusive, or more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community, one that begins with truth, recognition, and accountability for the harm, hardships, and injustices experienced by indigenous peoples. Nevertheless, Native communities remain resilient, steadfast, and deeply rooted in their cultural traditions, rich histories, and unwavering advocacy to protect and preserve their sacred lands. We honor this legacy by strengthening our commitment to sustainability, environmental stewardship, and the protection of these biodiverse lands for current and future generations. And whereas the Village of Oak Park recognizes the value of many contributions made to our community and the United States of America through indigenous peoples, knowledge, labor, spirituality, technology, science, philosophy, arts, and the deep cultural contribution that substantially shaped the character of our country. And whereas the Village of Oak Park has a responsibility to promote and honor our nation's indigenous history and contributions of the indigenous people to our village, our state, and our country. And whereas Indigenous Peoples' Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations to the United Nations-sponsored International Conference of Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations in the Americas, and whereas the United States endorsed the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the Declaration, on December 16th, 2010, and the Declaration recognizes Indigenous peoples have suffered from historic injustices as a result of inter alia, their colonization and disposition of their lands, territories, and resources. And whereas Article 15 of the Declaration recognizes the right of Indigenous people to the dignity and diversity of their cultures, traditions, histories, and aspirations, which shall appropriately reflected in education and public information, and places an obligation on the states to take effective measures in consultation and cooperation with the Indigenous people concerned to combat prejudice and eliminate discrimination, and to promote tolerance, understanding, and good relations among Indigenous peoples and all the segments of society. And whereas the state of Illinois has taken measures to protect the rights and heritage of Native and Indigenous peoples, including the enactment of the Human Remains Protection Act, HB 3413, which establishes procedures for discovering and returning human remains to Native nations, and SB 1446, which prohibits schools from banning students from wearing cultural or Native regalia at graduation, and HB 1633, which recognizes Illinois public schools to include Native American history, covering sovereignty, forced relocation, cultural contributions, and the impact of discrimination in their curriculum, beginning with the 2024-25 school year. And now, therefore, be it resolved, I, GBK Enyia, on behalf of Vicky Skaman, President of the Village of Oak Park, and the Board of Trustees, do hereby proclaim the Village of Oak Park shall recognize Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday, October 13th, and each day thereafter on the second Monday in October, and encourage the community to reflect upon the ongoing struggles of Indigenous people on this land, and to celebrate the thriving culture and value of the Indigenous people. Dated this 14th day of October 2025.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Appreciate that very much. And now we also have a motion to approve a proclamation declaring October 2025 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Oak Park. Motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Domestic Violence Awareness Month, October 2025. Whereas domestic violence remains a pervasive social issue that inflicts harm not only on victims, but also deeply impacts families, child witnesses, friends, and the broader community. And whereas domestic violence knows no boundaries, occurs in every neighborhood and community, affecting people of all ages, ethnicities, gender identities, economic situations, and faith backgrounds. And whereas approximately 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men nationwide experience some form of intimate partner abuse in their lifetime, and almost 10 million children are witnesses to domestic violence annually. In Illinois, calls to the Illinois Domestic Violence Hotline remain alarmingly high, with nearly 19,000 people seeking shelter in 2024, reminding us how critical it is to continue supporting survivors and preventing violence in our communities. And whereas the economic toll of domestic and family abuse in the United States is staggering, estimated by the CDC at over $3.6 trillion in lifetime costs for victims and communities, from healthcare and lost wages to housing and legal services. These impacts are expected to grow as our population ages and more survivors seek long-term care and support. And whereas Sarah Zinn, a key domestic violence survivor provider in Oak Park, Illinois, and the surrounding region, currently reaches over 2,300 individuals annually through its work to support survivors and interrupt the cycle of violence, offering crisis intervention and advocacy for victims and their families, prevention education on healthy relationships for youth, and training programs that build a skilled network of community advocates to strengthen our local response to domestic violence. And now therefore be it resolved that I, Vicky Skaman, President of Village of Oak Park and the Board of Trustees, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2025 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the Village of Oak Park and call on all community members to act this month by partnering with Sarah's Inn and support local efforts to assist victims of these crimes in finding the help and the healing they need. Thank you. Carol Gall, Executive Director of Sarah's Inn, please come on up. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know you have an event coming up.
Thank you so much. It's just so wonderful to have your partnership and support, not only during October, Domestic Violence Month, but of course, throughout the entire year. We just appreciate everything that the village does in partnership with us to make sure that we're not only educating the community and outreaching to the community, but making sure that people feel safe and secure in outreaching for resources. So we're celebrating our 45th anniversary this year. We have our big fundraiser on Saturday, so thank you all so much for your partnership and support.
Wonderful, wonderful. I don't know if Joe is available for a photo. I'll be bringing the proclamation with me on Saturday.
Okay.
And you have someone with you?
Kelly Mitchell.
Okay. Do you want to?
Yeah, I want to come down for a picture.
Joe will come out and we'll take a photo. Thank you. All right, see you Saturday. Bye. Okay. All right. Managers report.
Thank you, President Skaman, trustee members. Just to have an update to the calendars, October, November, and December. The key updates really revolve around the changes to the budget schedule. You'll see that the updated schedule reflects a budget adoption date of December 2nd, which is typically what we've done is adopt a budget on the last meeting of the year. So the change really is from November 18th to December 2nd. That reflects some of the work that we've been doing with the Finance Committee and the need to do some additional work on our CIP program and making some adjustments there. And so we've made the adjustment to the schedule to be responsive to the interest of the Finance Committee in that regard. The other notable change is on 11/20. We do expect to come back to the village board to discuss options for the police facility and municipal campus here at Village Hall. And hopefully at that time actually receive some direction on a particular option that the board would like to pursue. And then also that too will give us some insight on what the probable budget impacts might be and will assist us in additional continuing to do our long-term financial planning as we work towards bringing that back to you sometime in the first quarter of next year. So if there are any questions about the calendars, be happy to take them. Otherwise, if there are no questions tonight, be happy to take them by email or a phone call or otherwise.
Any questions? All right, excellent. Thank you. So then moving forward on the agenda, we have village board committees. This is a time for anyone serving as a liaison to a board or a commission to provide any updates. After the budget season, we'll be looking to have a schedule around this item. Citizen Commission vacancy report provided by the village clerk's office. Anybody interested in serving on a village board or commission can please email Clerk Waters at clerk@oak-park.us. And now I would entertain a motion to consent to the village president's appointments of, and I'm going to read them from the attachment because I'm not sure if we were able to there was a small correction. Zach Carstensen, appoint as a commissioner to the Community Relations Commission. Bridgett Hedgeman to the Community Relations Commission, Gary Arnold, reappoint as chair to the Disability Access Commission, Chris Pinc, a member of the Environment and Energy Commission, and Maureen Mclachlan to the Liquor Control Review Board. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion by trustee Eater and seconded by trustee Straw. All in favor? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, and congratulations to all of those members. Very much appreciated. And now, moving to the consent agenda, we have removed item H from the consent agenda. So I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with that removal. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by trustee Straw and seconded by trustee Eater. Clerk Waters, would you please take the roll?
Trustee Straw,
Yes.
Trustee Eater,
Yes.
Trustee Enyia,
Yes.
Trustee Levin Jacobson,
Yes.
Trustee Taglia,
Yes.
Trustee Wesley,
Yes.
and President Skaman.
Yes, thank you. So the consent agenda has been approved. I'm going to take the liquor license item next, regular agenda item. Concur with the Liquor Control Review Board and adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 3, Article 8, Section 3-8-1 and Section 3-8-2 of the Oak Park Village Code for an issuance of a restaurant Class B6 license to Keya's Kreations and doing business as Color Me Mine. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by trustee Straw and seconded by trustee Eater. If you'll please join us. Are you with the business? Yes. Would love to hear from you. Oh, yeah. You can come right up here.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sanju. I am the owner of Color Me Mine pottery painting business. First of all, thank you for considering our application for the BYOB. As I said, we are pottery painting business. We have already made ceramic potteries at our studio. Our guests can paint it. We provide all the supplies, and we glaze and fire it for them. So we would like to include the BYOB option for our guests for parties and scheduled events only, so that they can have some fun along with painting. That's all.
Thank you. Can you share your location for those listening in?
Yeah, so we are located at 124 North Oak Park Avenue, the old Oberweis location.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Well, we're grateful for your investment in our community. With that, Clerk Waters, would you please take the roll?
Trustee Straw,
Yes.
Trustee Eater,
Yes.
Trustee Enyia,
Yes.
Trustee Levin Jacobson,
Yes.
Trustee Taglia,
Yes.
Trustee Wesley,
Yes.
President Skaman.
Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So if we can go to item H then, if that works for staff. A motion to accept Pivot Consulting Group's Phase 5 report regarding police oversight recommendations. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by trustee Tagley and seconded by trustee Enyia. Hi.
Yes, I'd like to introduce Kier Chang, Assistant Village Manager, HR Director, who's been the staff person responsible for this item. Relates to the comprehensive review of an update to the Citizen Police Oversight Committee's charter and the series of recommendations that came out of that previously discussed at the Village Board sometime in September. So we're bringing it back for approval at this time, and happy to answer any questions. Kira, maybe I'm going to turn it over to you if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, nope. So I'm just happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Okay, would have trustee Levin Jacobson?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to look at this item again, just because we had a pretty robust conversation when it came up in September. But I left that meeting with some lack of clarity around the position that would be established. And I thought it would be useful to at least revisit, talk a little bit more through detail of what that position would entail, where structurally in the organization it would be housed, and just hear a little bit more, just because I felt leaving that meeting that we hadn't really established any kind of consensus on that one point. Otherwise, obviously very happy with the work of Pivot and excited to adopt all of their recommendations.
Yeah, thank you so much, Trustee Loving-Jacobson. So with regard to that position, there's a couple of key points that I want to make. One, what staff are actually recommending for this position is to take an existing part-time position that's within our Office of DEI, it's a vacant research assistant position, and converting it from a part-time position to a full-time DEI analyst or DEI manager role. So in that role, that position would be responsible for the operationalizing of police oversight within the organization from a structural perspective, using DEI as kind of the guiding lens for that work. That person would be responsible for a wide variety of police oversight related tasks. So that is going to include the initial implementation of an updated ordinance and procedural rules for our Police Oversight Committee. That's going to include the working with the committee and the police department on complaint intake, monitoring the complaints to conclusion. It would serve potentially as the staff liaison to the Citizen Police Oversight Committee. It would conduct the data analysis, trend analysis, and policy analysis for items related to police oversight. And it would really serve as that in-house kind of community engagement specialist on the issue of police oversight. So we believe that this is a role that would work closely with our DEI office, with the Citizen Police Oversight Committee, and with the community to stand up oversight and have it be operationalized within the village organization, not just serve as like the liaison to the Police Oversight Committee.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh,
This is just accepting this report, right? It's not approving the contents, correct? Or is this approving the contents as well?
So you would be accepting the report, and it would give staff general guidance of how to begin implementing the oversight recommendations that were made by Pivot. However, things like the position and budget allocations would still be part of the fiscal year 26 budgeting process.
Yes.
I don't want to vote against the report, but I don't want to vote for that FTE position. I'd be happy to split the vote so I can vote for the report without voting for the position. Otherwise, I have to vote no, and I don't really want to do that.
The only thing, just a point of clarification, the only thing that I would add, though, to that, just for your benefit, Trustee Wesley, is without the capacity to implement these recommendations, they won't move forward. They may move forward either slowly or, some of them may move forward. We have some, there's a number of things we're going to talk about during the budget process. And what we try to do with this is actually address a capacity challenge we have in the DI office, utilizing the part-time position, and then also accepting all of these recommendations and taking on this additional work. So combining those two interests so that we can keep the work going in the DEI office as conceived, as well as take on these new responsibilities. So I think without that additional capacity, then what we'll see is a reduction in our ability to actually fulfill some of these things and slow some of this stuff down. So I just want to add that in this context. And this is really just kind of a preview to what we'll be talking about during the budget process. I think Keya kind of gave a really good analysis, and I'm just kind of punctuating those points in terms of what we're trying to address with the capacity in DEI office, as well as trying to accept these new responsibilities to support a revised CPOC and a more update updated and proactive sort of CPOC support. So,
Got it.
yeah.
Could we bring all of this back then at the same time so that we're having that conversation comprehensively?
Well, I'm just wondering, though,
Well,
if really what we are is receiving the report, and interrupt me anytime, it's fine. And the content of the report and the items that are highlighted for further review, those things you agree with, is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Okay, and so in your comments, and if you'd like to add to your comments now, they would still be part of the record of the minutes?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's probably going to be, if we don't split it, it'll probably be 6-1 unless somebody else is voting with me. My guess is it won't fail either way, right? Like, so my vote is largely just my own vote. So, I mean, I'm just asking out of courtesy, but we don't have to like bring it back. We don't have to move it and come back if the board doesn't think that's necessary.
Just in President Scaman and Trustee Wesley and Village Board. So I just want to clarify. So you can take this action tonight, and there will be a subsequent action to consider as part of the budget adoption. So we will be recommending a position to support advancement of these recommendations as part of the budget process. So there will be another opportunity to decide whether you support the position or not, despite what's in the content of the report. So if you accept the report tonight, there will be an opportunity in the future to decide what you want to do with the position.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
If you do have a recommendation on how your voice could be best heard here?
No, I think my comments kind of sum up kind of the way I'm feeling on it. I'll leave it to your discretion, President Scaman.
Jim?
So I had a couple, I do support the outcomes here, the recommendations of this report. But I find it hard to believe that, you know, we had 7 complaints last year that were legitimate complaints. 10 of total, 7, if you take out the ones that were related to parking, there were 3 that were removed, so we have 7. So to spend, I know a big part of this position is going to be spent with complaint intake and monitoring the complaints. It's just not, there's just not enough meat on the bone there to occupy a person, an FTE, and we're looking at funding gaps in years to come, and I don't want to not implement this plan. I do want to move ahead. I just don't, I mean, I think there's ways we can move ahead here without taking on a full-time employee at this position at this time. And I do think that in the private sector, what we would do is if something like this came along and we wanted to hire a new employee, first thing that would be said would be figure a way to get it done with everyone we've got, right, and try to do that. I know the DEI department is, and you mentioned, was busy, and it's got a lot of activity going on, and HR also can play a role in this. And I was just wondering if this couldn't be accomplished through that way, where we could work with it with our existing employees in existing departments without hiring a full-time employee to implement this, when a major part of it is for 7 complaints. Now, in Cambridge, they have 2.5 times the police force. So when this model, when these men were mentioning Cambridge, they have a lot of complaints. They've got to have more because they have 300 police officers. So we have like 90. So we don't have the volume that they do. I'm not trying to be difficult. I just think we should try to make do with what we've got. And if it doesn't work in a year or so, come back and say, we just can't make it go with this. We really do need this person. But let's try to do it with what we've got. That was my point.
I'm just making sure that everybody understands that we're adding a half employee, that the current
It's vacant, though.
is vacant, but I mean, that I could share more. I mean, we know that some activities of the DEI office have been a little on hold while we do onboarding. We had the racial equity assessment that took longer than otherwise would have. And a number of activities and events, but also what were we looking for when we first elevated a DEI office from manager to officer when, early in 2021 was, I think, also that policy advice. And that hasn't really, the department hasn't really had the opportunity to sink their teeth into that work above and beyond events. So, but I'm talking based on what I've witnessed over the last year, not with the benefit of the budget ask from our village manager of the whole department and their goals outlined. So I do think that maybe it is possible to still express the concerns that you have, that you're looking to, during the budget season, really understand what that position and what their duties would look like and the time commitment of those duties in the budget season, but still receive this report tonight, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'm comfortable receiving the report. I'm not comfortable with my vote signaling that I support all aspects of it, and I feel like that it would. I got another question. How many folks do we have in the DEI office right now?
3.5.
3.5, okay.
3.5.
And all those are filled, or is that the half is the vacant?
The half is the vacant position.
Got it. Is that including the chief DEI officer?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's
All
correct.
right. Yeah, I mean, like I said, your discretion, President Skaman.
Yeah, and the premise is that the staff are fully allocated right now, right? So that's just something to keep in mind. So then, if you're adding responsibilities, then something has to give, right?
All right, Derek. Otherwise, then we'll go to a vote.
Sorry to add complexity to this. I mean, I think it's worth having a conversation about this role. I think of a couple of things. One is that the role of a data analyst feels like it is needed in serving the village. I guess I don't love to bring it up, but in July I asked a bunch of questions of the police department on their annual report, and none of those questions have been answered. And those are basic data questions that they should be able to produce answers to, and I'm not seeing those answers. So it feels like, maybe there's another reason for that, but like the data analyst piece of it seems to be potentially missing right now, or there isn't a capacity to do that right now. And I see there being a lot of value to having that kind of capacity on village staff. Second point I want to make is that I believe when the Cambridge model was discussed, that role of the support person kind of was in their equivalent of like their commission office, which in Oak Park, that's the clerk's office. So is there a place have you considered putting this position in the clerk's office to support the commissions, CPOC being one of them, and also potentially being there to serve other commissions as well in their data analysis kinds of work?
So,
You can. I just want to articulate this point. Typically, a civilian police oversight body, typically there is a liaison. What we've been doing is wearing multiple hats. We have our HR director serving as liaison while serving as HR director and doing other things in the organization, right? And so we've been doing the best we can to be responsive to the demands of CPOC, the new and emerging demands of CPOC. And so one of the things that emerged was that, hey, look, let's take a look at it, let's update it, let's evaluate it, and see what's needed in order to be responsive to CPOC's interest, the board's interest, and the community interest around it. So that's where we are. And in terms of the data analysis, we're positioning ourselves with the strategic intelligence manager in the police department, but which is really going to be supporting the police department and its data needs. And so we should see a little bit more responsiveness on the production of data, but the research, the independent data analysis should probably, as it is customary in other organizations across our nation, that it should be probably coming out of the manager's office, because it's a little bit, it's not in the police, it's in the manager's office, some neutrality to it. So with that said, I think the idea of having the liaison be in the clerk's office or be in HR is really kind of an outlier. you know, the typical situation is that it would be organized probably out of the manager's office, either out of the community relations function. Typically, you know, if you go downstate to Champaign, it is the Office of Equity and Engagement that formerly was the equivalent to our community relations department here, right? That has a manager assigned to liaison and support their civilian oversight, police oversight committee. And I mean, I can give other examples. I mean, Cambridge is another example where, you know, you had an executive director was actually liaisoning and supporting that function. So, Kira, I don't know. I just wanted to make that point in terms of just what the sort of the proven sort of established practices for how the system works. But.
Yeah, I guess I have just a couple of points to add to that. So, in terms of data analysis, Manager Jackson did mention about the strategic intelligence manager within the police department. That person just started, I think, last week, and so we expect to begin seeing more data analysis coming out of the police department with regularity, and that's an identified area that we were looking to fill because we know that's something that the community and this board is very interested in seeing. In terms of data analysis for other boards and commissions, you know, which is I think kind of the point you're raising from the idea of positioning the position in the clerk's office. So this position is not necessarily solely meant to like serve as the CPOC's person, right? Like it's not a CPOC employee. The idea is that we are operationalizing police oversight within the organization, and that person's duties and responsibilities will support the work that CPOC does, enhance the work that CPOC does, and be able to strengthen the analysis and other things by establishing a strong relationship with our police department. For positioning within the manager's office, the benefit of that, because this question came up quite a bit with the review itself and the analysis itself, is the police chief reports to the village manager, right? So there is value in that connection to the manager's office because the police chief would receive direction from the manager's office in order to implement changes, in order to, like, if there's confusion about who should be doing what, and if this is something that the staff person should be working on versus CPOC wants them to, but it's outside of their purview. So the positioning in the manager's office benefits from that relationship and from that reporting structure that is confusing because, you know, CPOC was interested in kind of like, we want to hire this person, we want to manage them, and it's a little bit different. So, and then maybe just to Trustee Taglia's point, we definitely did a lot of listening in that study session that was held with the original presentation, and we heard from the board several concerns around if this was a full-time position. The consultants seemed very confident that it was a full-time role, and we believe that it has certainly the capacity to be allocated to a lot of different responsibilities, but we thought that bringing it in the DEI office kind of at that 0.5 was a reasonable step into that operationalizing piece. There will initially be a lot of work with standing up all of the new ordinance language. There will be a lot of work developing those procedural rules. They are highly technical and they are very specific, and that's actually going to be the hardest part of implementing the recommendations, is really aligning on like the details of how the committee does its work and how they receive complaints and how that information comes in. So, like, certainly we understand that we don't receive hundreds of complaints a year. That's a good thing, but there is still a lot of work to be done, even once those new items are implemented with regard to receiving complaints in person, you know, having somebody who's had a tough experience come in and talk to a real person, you know, who's not in the police department to talk about what their concerns are, about arranging trainings for CPOC and with the police department and all those things. So we do think that there is significant amount of work that would make it necessary to have that staff person, maybe not a full 1.0 FTE, but at least a half a position dedicated to the CPOC responsibilities.
Currently, the DEI office has 3 commissions that it serves. So if you add CPOC without any capacity, now it's serving 4. It's unusual. We've had a situation like that before, and it creates a lot of challenges to have all that demand on one area in a particular small area. So.
Yeah, I think with their scope completely changing and adding on so much additional work, to think that those questions were going to get answered just by spreading them out to more people is going to cause more chaos, and you're limiting the work that they do. They don't only do those amount of cases every year because that's all we're getting. That's all they get to. There's some that have been out for a year and a half or longer that haven't been addressed or are just got addressed at that period in time because they don't have all of the tools that they need right at hand. And part of that is the position, part of that is the system that they're using that's getting updated. All of that is going to need people who know how to utilize that system and then can also report back to not only CPOC but to the other commissions that might be utilizing their help. So I think it's a huge need, and it was something that Pivot specifically pointed out as a pain point for not just CPOC as the commission, but even for the police. So I'm glad that they've already implemented the analysis person on the police side, which is great. And I think that this will also help to enhance. I don't think that it's going to be a drain. And that person, like you said, can be utilized in other ways. So it's not like they're just going to be stuck doing this work all the time if there isn't as much of a workload.
Okay, so before we take a vote, I just want to.
Can I ask another question? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sorry, Jen, I can't see.
It's okay. I have my little emoji hand up. Sorry. Another question about the role and how it would function. Can you talk about how it would be this person in this role would be able to maintain independence and transparency? If it's part of staff and part of, the same unit that the police department that oversees the police department, how can we make sure that it's truly independent and truly transparent in the way that it's doing its work?
Well, we hope that the data, the idea is to really look at the data from an empirical standpoint. The data is the data; it's factual. The opportunity to review the data with CPOC staff, all stakeholders, publish the data, make it available to the public. I mean, transparency is actually a big part of this, and being able to have the capacity to produce the data with regularity and on demand. So when you I don't know if I'm completely kind of interpreting the question about its independence. I mean, if the specific question is there a way to have it work outside of the village government structure? Probably not. And it's not typical for it to be organized in that manner. So, Trustee Levinson-Jacobson, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but perhaps you could help clarify maybe a little further about.
I'm just thinking about somewhat hypothetically, but also somewhat anecdotally based on, what I've heard. And I just worry or wonder if it might dissuade someone from bringing a concern forward if they know that it's the same boss, right, overseeing both units. I don't know if that's true, but it's a consideration that I think as we onboard this person, because I do support this role, this effort, I think it's important work that we need. But I want to make sure that we're thinking about, transparency, independence, right? They should be independent of the police department. They should be independent of us. As you just said, like follow the data transparently and honestly. I feel good about that charge for the role. I hope that.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen and what we're seeing from this report is we have some engaged civilians that have taken a strong stake in providing their external expertise to oversee this process. And I think what we're speaking to with these recommendations and this independent assessment is how can we strengthen that process and strengthen their capacity to actually provide that independent oversight, and as a body of stakeholders can perform their opinions based upon empirical evidence that's produced on demand and systematically. And certainly, you know, there will be recommendations that may be different, but I think that's just a natural part of the process. I think what we really want to do is have a fair process, an objective process, and a process that everybody can trust and believe in that manner. So, and I think what's being suggested by the recommendations is to try to bring a level of organization and standardization to the process so that it comes across as fair and accessible to all stakeholders who, and you know, and as you can see, there are a large variety of stakeholders in this police oversight area. So
I do think, if I can add, that the commission itself provides a level of transparency in that the chair of the commission has direct access to us as elected officials, and that structure. I mean, anyone who's going to be paid with government dollars is going to ultimately be working under the village manager unless they're otherwise elected. And but I do think that this structure is going to work towards building that trust for the exact purpose of transparency.
yeah, there's a couple other things I just want to point out, because we are talking about adding a part-time position. It's important to make sure it's clear that the half-time position that was established with the initial DEI office was to provide support for data analysis on a village-wide basis in order to provide a foundation for implementing DEI throughout this organization. So we see that responsibility still continuing. We've seen an evolution of responsibilities related to community engagement around all these events that the office has taken on. And so there is a lot of pressure on this group. And it's really, we added essentially two and a half people. No, actually 2 people. The community relations functions have continued with that one position that we have dedicated to doing some of that traditional work, but we've stood up and operationalized the DEI office and positioned some technical support on a part-time basis to get at the data analysis that's needed to support the unit. We did something similar with sustainability, where we had a part-time fellow position that was supporting sustainability. And so what we're talking about here is adding a half-time position to take on some additional responsibilities and continue to strengthen our DEI program so that it can effectively be implemented and institutionalized throughout the organization and the community to support DEI in general.
And the person won't be working in the police department directly. Okay. Jenna, did that answer your question, or do you want an additional follow-up?
No, I'm okay, thank you.
Okay, no worries. Sorry, we can't see the little emoji, unfortunately. So please interrupt anytime throughout the rest of the meeting. And but we just wanted to reiterate from the initial conversation is that anytime we approve a report, we approve a plan, there is that separate time when we have to make the very difficult decisions of, spending dollars. And so staff receiving this report from us with all of the comments that have been shared, it still is a mechanism for holding responsible that we've been heard in where the concerns might lie, and being able to justify the time of that additional half person. When it comes to, which to make to be clear, I do fully support, but it's no guarantee until we approve a budget that the person is committed. That's true with every plan. That's true with a bike plan, you know, where we might have to, or a sustainability plan, crop plan. And so I do aim to make sure that everybody feels comfortable that their vote is representing where they stand. And so I'd like the focus on this vote to really be that the content of the report that we've received, and actually the staff recommendation of a half person isn't even what the original recommendation from the consultant was, which was a full-time person. Okay, so with that, I'll entertain, but it doesn't really move forward unless we can vote on it right now for the budget process. Otherwise, it would be determined by staff to not put this in. And I'm not hearing that from a majority of the board. So I do think a vote is warranted. Clerk Waters, please take the roll.
Trustee Eater,
Yes.
Trustee Enyia,
Yes.
Trustee Levin Jacobson,
Yes.
Trustee Straw,
Yes.
Trustee Taglia,
Yes.
Trustee Wesley,
Abstain.
President Skaman.
Yes, thank you. And so we're moving to the regular agenda, starting with item R. We have a resolution approving extended term and special services agreement amendment number 5 with MC Squared Energy Services LLC for the Oak Park Community Choice Aggregation Program through December of 2028 and authorizing its execution. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Village Manager Jackson. That's
Yes.
motion by Trustee Wesley,
Thank you.
second by Trustee Eater.
Yes, this is a follow-up to an earlier item, so we're bringing it back for consideration and trying to move it forward. We have Ahmad Zayed, Deputy Village Manager, and Lindsay Roland Araka, who are representing this work. So, Lindsay?
Sure, yeah, good evening. So we're back before you tonight with this item, which is the same item that was considered in September, and then the following item as well is what was requested, which is an agreement with IGS Energy, specifically a non-marketing and sales solicitation agreement in which they agree that as long as MC Squared is providing the aggregation services, that they will not conduct the door-to-door solicitation within Oak Park. So I'm here to answer any questions. Our consultant, Mark Pruitt, is here to answer any questions as well.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just want to say thank you for doing this. I was like hoping that we could get it done. So thank you for doing that. So yeah, I'm excited to, I hoped it would sail through like last time we brought this up, but we found this one issue. We addressed it. So thank you. I'm ready to go for it.
Yeah, well done, and thank you for the initial questions. So then we'll just move forward, and Clerk Waters, if you'll please take the roll.
Trustee Wesley,
Yes.
Trustee Eater,
Yes.
Trustee Enyia,
Yes.
Trustee Levin Jacobson,
Yes.
Trustee Straw,
Yes.
Trustee Taglia,
Yes.
President Skaman.
Yes, thank you. And so that contract has been approved. Now we've got a resolution approving it's the resolution, but resolution approving a non-marketing and sales solicitation agreement with Interstate Gas Supply LLC, doing business as IGS Energy and authorizing its execution. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Straw and seconded by Trustee Eater. Any additional questions, comments for this item before we vote? Very good. Clerk Waters, please take the roll.
Trustee Straw,
Yes.
Trustee Eater,
Yes.
Trustee Enyia,
Yes.
Trustee Levin Jacobson,
Yes.
Trustee Taglia,
Yes.
Trustee Wesley,
Yes.
President Skaman.
Yes. All right, very good. So item R and S have been approved. We are moving to item T, which is a motion by Trustee Straw, seconded by Trustee Enyia for a presentation by IAFF Local 95 regarding a staffing study prepared by the International Association of Firefighters on behalf of IAFF Local 95. Village Manager Jackson.
Thank you, President Skaman. As they're coming up, I'm not necessarily going to speak to this item, but the next item is a companion item, which represents an independent assessment of fire department operations that we were directed to pursue as part of the budget process last fall. So when we get to that item, I'll actually offer some commentary and then introduce our guest to present that report as well.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. President Skaman, Board of Trustees, Manager Jackson, and Village Administration. My name is Robert Toth. I'm the President of Oak Park Firefighters Union, Local 95. Local 95 is here tonight to present our staffing study to the village. The performance study was commissioned by Local 95 through its affiliation with the International Association of Firefighters. Because of that affiliation, this study was conducted at no cost to the village or its taxpayers. And its primary goal is to assess whether the Village of Oak Park is meeting its nationally accepted standards as they apply to fire departments. These metrics are derived by both the National Fire Protection Agency's Code 1710, the standard for the organization and deployment of fire department operations by career fire departments, and OSHA 1910, General Industry Regulations and Standards. It is worth noting that the International Association for Firefighters, the International Association for Fire Chiefs, and the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs Association jointly recognize the NFPA Standard 1710 as the industry's best and only practice for safe, efficient, and effective firefighting. The study compiled information specific to Oak Park, such as census data, mapping data, building construction, and 5 years of call data applied to those standards set forth by NFPA and OSHA. This information is unbiased and solely based on the data which is publicly available. As you will see, the study will outline deficiencies in our current staffing as it applies to fire and EMS coverage within the village. The study will provide recommendations for staffing so that Oak Park can meet the industry standards and provide safer, more efficient, and appropriate coverage to its residents and visitors. Local 95 will gladly field any questions regarding the study after the presentation. With that, I'm going to present Adam Smith. He's our data expert, and he's also a firefighter with Oak Park.
Thank you all for having me. Thank you. All right, yeah, I'm here to go over the data with you guys from the study. Basically, this was a comprehensive report. It included the following analysis: a community risk assessment, a workload analysis, current response coverages, and recommended staffing and response moving forward. We're going to go over all that tonight, present the current staffing, and present the plan or the recommendations from the study going on. Current staffing, Station 1 is our downtown central station. It has truck 631, 2 ambulances and a command vehicle, command 620. Station 2 is the north side, and that is a single engine house. Station 3 is on the south side, and that holds an engine and an ambulance. It's important to note that each fire apparatus currently holds 3 firefighters minimum on it on any given day. And our Station 1, our downtown station, does not have a fire engine. It only hosts a fire truck. Fire engines are the ones that have the hose and the water on it, so they're the ones that actually fight the fire. The trucks support them. They're equally as important, but it is important to have water in your downtown area. Our department deploys 3 shifts. Each of those work 24-hour periods. 16 members are on duty each day. That includes our battalion chief, so 16 total. The department very rarely is able to staff above that minimum, and in fact, it's heavily reliant on overtime to meet those minimum staffing levels, as evidenced by our large overtime budgets, usually close to $1 million each year. Short-term recommendations that came from the study: staff all fire apparatus with a minimum of 4 firefighters and add a staff aide for Command 620. The long-term recommendations were to rebuild Station 2, move an ambulance to Station 2, add an engine to Station 1, and increase staffing to 6 firefighters on all fire apparatus, and we'll get into more of the detail on why as we move on here. What this would mean for the village immediately would be hire 3 new firefighter positions per shift for a total of 9 new firefighter positions. That would increase shift staffing from the current of 22 to 25 members. With our 5 daily paid time off slots that were allowed, that would start each day with 20 members on duty before any injury or illness. That's 4 above minimum staffing levels. With the increase of staffing and no increase in our daily minimums, the department would see a significant overtime reduction, and that would offset a large portion of the cost of hiring 9 new firefighters. This allows the department to build staffing naturally over time while reducing overtime. It's worth noting that for firefighters, overtime is usually working 48-hour shifts instead of 24, so 2 days without sleep or with a very high lack of sleep, which can lead to injuries and illness, so we also think you would have some injury reduction as part of this naturally. This plan also requires no extra cost for additional fire apparatus, as we would just be adding staffing to current rigs we have. Where did they get these recommendations? Most of it came from the National Fire Protection Association, specifically their standards 1710 and 1500, which both directly relate to staffing in the fire service. Both of those standards recommend that a minimal acceptable fire company staffing level should be 4 members responding on each fire apparatus. That minimum rises based on the hazard type and most specifically the population density. So you can see on this chart here, rural fire departments and suburban fire departments should have a minimum staffing of 4 per fire apparatus, urban 5, and densely urban 6. To meet the densely urban classification, you're looking at 3,000 people per square mile. Oak Park is about 11,600 people per square mile on average, so we're close to 4 times the average to meet that standard. And then where did these standards come from? Well, many of the staffing guidelines from the NFPA derive from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST's 2010 Residential Structure Fire Study. This study compared how quickly and effectively fire companies staffed with 2, 3, 4, and 5 firefighters could complete 22 firefighting tasks normally encountered in structure fires. Examples of some of these would be obtaining water supply, stretching hose lines, and conducting search and rescue for victims. The study showed that 4 firefighter companies were able to complete these tasks 25% faster than 3 firefighter companies, which is our current, and 30% faster than 2 firefighter companies. The study showed in whole that larger fire companies were more efficient, safer, and healthier due to decreased stress levels on the firefighters on those rigs. Heart rates of those firefighters decreased as more firefighters were added to the vehicles. This is a fact sheet straight from NFPA defining what a company is. Basically, it's a group of members under direct supervision, and they are going to arrive on the scene and operate on one apparatus together. So when we're talking about 4 firefighter companies, that's what they mean. There are some exceptions to arriving on one apparatus. Multiple apparatus can be assigned, dispatched, and arrive together, but they have to operate continuously throughout the day, and they have to be managed by a single officer. The next standard is OSHA's 2-in, 2-out regulation. This is enforceable from OSHA. Basically, this is saying you have to have 4 firefighters on any scene of a structure fire before you can begin interior operations. Because when you send 2 firefighters into a burning building to begin fighting the fire, you need to have 2 firefighters outside of the building actively ready to go rescue those first 2 in case something happens. NFPA standards for how many firefighters should be on the scene of different structure fires based off their hazard level. So starting with a low hazard alarm, these are single family dwellings, less than 2,000 square feet, with no basements and no exposures. So it's important to note that there is very little, if any of those in this town. Pretty much everything has basements or has close exposures. To fight those fires, you need a minimum of 16 members or 17 if an aerial device is used, which is our truck 631. We do use an aerial device. So because we only staff 16 members per day, we do not meet that standard. The next step up would be a medium hazard structure fire. This is the majority of the town. Garden style apartments, and again, any residential structures that have basements or close exposures. You would need 27 members or 28 if you have an aerial device, so we are nowhere close to that standard with our current staffing. And then the next step up would be high hazard alarms, which are high rises for us, and you need 42 or 43 members if the building's equipped with a fire pump. Here's an example of a medium hazard structure fire. This was on North Humphrey Avenue in 2015. We have many examples of these types of fires, but as you can see, 3 homes are on fire simultaneously. 2 residents were rescued from that structure, which is important to note that when 2 people were rescued from that structure, that also sent 2 ambulances to the hospital to take care of those people, which is 4 less members available to fight that fire then. And this is just why these are medium hazard fires, because often when we're pulling up to the scene, we're fighting 2, maybe 3 fires instead of just 1. So we need more people for that. Another case study, this is 151 North Kenilworth Avenue. It's a high-rise fire that happened earlier this year. It's an unsprinklered building with no standpipes. There was a fire on the 6th floor. This is clearly a high hazard building per the NFPA classifications. The NFPA recommends that we should have had 36 firefighters and 7 command staff, or 43 total members, within 10 minutes and 10 seconds of that fire starting, or us being dispatched from that fire. In reality, we had only 10 firefighters and 3 command staff on scene within that 10 minutes and 10 seconds. Total throughout the whole scene, the whole incident, we had 30 firefighters and 5 command staff, so we never met the standard for a high hazard building. All right, these are maps for current 4-minute road coverage, so how the NFPA wants you to be on the scene within 4 minutes of travel time. So this map designates how well we're doing where our stations are. Anything that's not highlighted in green is a gap in coverage. You can see we have a pretty large gap on the northwest side of town. That is because Station 2 is pretty far east, so it's not able to reach that fast enough. And then we do also have gaps on the center of town on the east and west sides, which are high call volume areas for us, and they're densely populated areas. This is the same type of coverage, but for 2 in, 2 out. So this is basically how fast we can get 4 firefighters to the scene to meet that 2 in, 2 out regulation. Again, 2 firefighters go in, 2 stay out to rescue them. If you include ambulance coverage, because the ambulance can come in and be that 2 people on the outside for that fire vehicle, you can see the south side and the center part of town on the left map does provide some coverage. Station 2 is kind of on an island up north because there is no ambulance with that vehicle. So they have very little coverage on the north side. But it's important to note, too, that the ambulances are the busiest rigs in town. You can't always rely on them to be in the station available to respond to a structure fire. So that map on the right shows you our 2 in, 2 out coverage without ambulances, which we have very little, about 11% coverage on that. Some good news, our ALS 8-minute road coverage. So they want an ALS vehicle to be on the scene within 8 minutes. We do that 99.1% of the time, so we're doing really good there. That map is perfect. All right, back to the short-term recommendations. So we're going to staff all fire apparatus with a minimum of 4 firefighters and add a full-time staff aide to assist the battalion chief. It's very important to staff all the fire apparatus properly, because then when we show up to the scene of a fire, even if other vehicles aren't there or we're waiting a little bit for another rig to show up, that engine itself or that truck itself is ready to go start operations safely, efficiently, and effectively. All right, so if you were to include the short-term recommendations into our staffing, this is what would happen to that 2 in, 2 out map we just went over. So the light green area is that 11% coverage we had without ambulances. Now just by putting another firefighter on each rig, each fire apparatus covers OSHA's 2 in, 2 out response by itself. So you increase the coverage by a large amount. That's the dark green area. It actually increases about 7-fold. This is the low hazard alarm coverage with the short-term recommendations included. So again, we don't have many low hazard alarm structures, but currently our current staffing offers 0% coverage for the town for that. With the short-term recommendations included, we would get to about 32% of the town, so at least part of the center of town could start getting covered. So it's still not great, but it's starting to get closer to these standards. Long-term recommendations, rebuild Station 2. The main reason for that is Station 2 is over 100 years old. It was not built for modern fire engines, and it cannot physically hold anything but one vehicle. So we cannot put an ambulance there even if we wanted to currently. So the goal would be to rebuild that. If we could relocate it further west for the mapping data, that would be ideal, but at least rebuild it and put an ambulance up at Station 2 so the north side of town has that coverage. We'd add an engine to Station 1, which would give you water downtown to protect the downtown area and our most densely populated area, and then increase staffing to 6 firefighters on all apparatus. That would meet that densely urban standard for NFPA. This is what the long-term recommendations would do to low hazard alarm coverage. So now we're at about 91%. So basically we could cover most of the town for a low hazard alarm. And now we start getting some medium hazard alarm coverage. And this is the great majority of our fires would be medium hazard alarm. So with the long-term recommendations, we start providing about 50% of the town coverage in the allotted time. Workload analysis, you can see in the orange and yellow areas, those are our high call volume areas. Again, those were some of the parts of town that had lapses in coverage on the west and east side, the center part of town. That west side of town also has a population density of almost 30,000 people per square mile. Call volume continues to increase every year. That's been going on for decades. We're about 500 calls roughly above what we were last year, so we're on pace for another record year this year. From 2020 to 2024, you can see the increase went from 6,700 to 8,800 responses per year. In that same time frame, unit responses also increased, so the call volume is 3 calls or 3 vehicles could go on a call, and that's just one call, but those are 3 unit responses because those vehicles had to travel and they were not in the house to respond to another emergency. So those are even more, 14,879 last year. The black line here denotes the 4-minute travel time, 4-minute response times. Anything above that bar is saying that we did not meet the 4-minute response time. So you can see all of our units are above that. That can be a benchmark that suggests the department may need additional resources. 5 of our 7 units did decrease travel time from 2020 to 2024. I think we attribute that mostly to the 3rd ambulance being put in service. Overlapping calls. So basically this chart is showing you that about 5,000 times last year, 2 vehicles were out on the street at the same time on a call. And same thing for 3 units. There's about 3,000 times that occurred. That's important because each time that happens, there's less apparatus to respond to a structure fire, which is why, again, it's so important for you to have the right amount of people on each fire apparatus because you don't know how many of you are going to get on that fire right away. This is the community risk assessment portion. The main thing for us for a risk was population density. As we talked about, Oak Park has 11,600 people on average per square mile, and we have parts that are 30,000 people per square mile. That is 10 times higher than the average needed to be classified as densely urban. Some other factors are vulnerable age groups. 22.9% of the Oak Park population falls in this category. This category typically takes a lot of resources from the fire department. We have poverty, disabilities, vacant housing, and homes built before 1970, which is 78.6% of homes in Oak Park. And that's important because they usually lack modern fire protection, so they can be more dangerous. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Bob here for the conclusion.
So the information we provided tonight is all unbiased data and provides the village with a clear direction on how to properly staff the fire department safely and effectively. I just want to highlight a few of the major data points going forward. 1710 is clear. It recommends minimally the staff firefighters with a minimum of 4 on every rig that goes out, every fire rig. What that does is allows a single fire apparatus to perform 2 in 2 out operations at a structure fire on an initial response in their district. It's going to make the department less reliant on mutual aid like Forest Park and River Forest to come in to provide that coverage for us. Decreases time to perform fire ground tasks. And it makes conditions safer for firefighters, and it also decreases risk or injury to firefighters and also the residents of Oak Park. The increase in 2 in 2 out 4-minute coverage goes up by 36.7%. But the increase without ambulances for the 2 in 2 out coverage in the 4-minute response goes up from 11.6% to 77.9%, which is a 571% increase in that category. On the long-term recommendations, relocating or rebuilding Station 2 would allow the station to house more than one fire apparatus or an additional ambulance. The addition of an engine at Station 1 would allocate a pumper in the densest population district in Oak Park. Like I said, like Adam said, we do not have an engine in the center of town where you have the highest population of high-rises for Oak Park. And finally, the fire department should be designed to adequately respond to multiple emergencies simultaneously. The staffing increases that are recommended in the IAFF study would accomplish minimum standards, and I do mean minimum, to minimize the loss of life and property within the fire department that we're charged to protect for the Village of Oak Park. And that concludes our study. I don't know if there's any questions right off the bat here anybody would have.
All right, I'm looking. Any questions, comments? Okay, Brian?
I guess I would just say, I think it would be helpful, to me at least, to hear both presentations, and then I might have some questions that sort of I want to understand the different perspectives on a particular question. So I think for me, I might want to call the firefighters back up after we hear.
We'll be available. Great.
Thank you.
Is that how the rest of the board feels?
I agree.
Yeah.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. And Village Manager Jackson, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so while Deputy Village Manager Lisa Shelley is getting ready to open us up, I'm just going to offer a few remarks, and then I'll turn it over to her to introduce our guests. So, last year during the budget process, I think there was a motion to add a fourth ambulance. And so, as you may recall, in 2022, we added a third ambulance. And back then, in working with the fire chief, recognizing the year-over-year increase in EMS calls, we felt like there was a need to add the additional firefighters to get to a point where we can guarantee the third ambulance be put into service. And I think last year, the prior fire chief recognized that in the future there might be a need for a fourth ambulance given the year-over-year increases to the EMS calls. That said, we had already understood there were other issues that were of concern to the village board as well as the management in terms of the year-over-year increases to the overtime costs, concerns about the safety and the injuries occurring in the fire department. And so our perspective on this was that we felt like we needed to take a comprehensive assessment of the fire department operations and get an independent assessment so we could understand entirely what's going on with the department and its operations to address all issues of concern. But it's important, I think, that we anchor back in history of where this evolved from, and that is the recognition that there has been a year-over-year increase in the EMS calls, and that's where the pressure has been applied. So at that time, what I acknowledged to the village board was that we are continuing to work on our long-term financial planning with an eye towards supporting the board's interest in fiscal sustainability of the village. This is not an unimportant point because one of the amazing things about working in our village is the way that we approach things or have is we tend to look at things holistically. We have not taken a holistic approach to managing our finances and our resources to address all of our goals. And the aspirations are very big, and yet we continue to try to do things in a fiscally responsible manner and not do it in a zero-sum manner. So that's the approach we have taken. And to that point, we added some resources to support the implementation of equity and inclusion initiatives and sustainability initiatives in those in the operations there, while also addressing all of our operational needs. So I just wanted to give that kind of introduction, a little bit of history of where this evolved from in terms of the increasing demand for the EMS calls and our response to that. I will also acknowledge that we have had over the last 8 years significant cyclical investments in the fire department itself from a capital standpoint and investing in our facilities. So I think with our report tonight, we're really trying to, we're reporting out on the independent assessment. It's just a report. We're not seeking any direction tonight. I want to impress upon the trustees that it's important that we look at, we just digest this report and allow it to provide a foundation for navigating the budget process this fall, as well as continue to navigate the strategic financial planning that I think will add to your perspectives on how to address the issues that are discussed tonight and others that you're concerned about. So with that introduction, we're going to deliver the report, and part of delivering the report is also a fiscal impact, high-level fiscal impact assessment of the Local 95's report that was just delivered. And so, Lisa, with that introduction, if you can introduce our guests and add any additional context that maybe I've left out just to get us started.
Thank you, Manager Jackson. No, Lisa Shelley, Deputy Village Manager. I don't believe there was any other details unless there's questions in that overview at this time. So I will introduce the team and who they represent. So here tonight we have Chief Terry and Deputy Chief Murphy with us tonight. We also have Interim CFO Donna Gaydon. Related to Baker Tilly, who is here this evening, who worked on the fire assessment. So we have Carol Jacobs, she's Managing Director and she led the project, along with Ned Pettis, he's Special Advisor, who is participating remotely today, so you may hear his voice over the Zoom. And then we also have Steve Toller, as Manager Jackson said. He's also the director and the lead on the village's long-term financial plan that was going on simultaneously with this project, but also they're here to do some of the financial analysis from the report. So, and both of these are uploaded and available as well on the agenda in the Granicus system. So I'm going to first begin with Carol when I pull up her presentation here. Oops.
Good evening. My name is Carol Jacobs. I'm happy to be here tonight to talk about our report of the fire department. We've been at this since March of this last year, March of the beginning of this year, and talked about doing a holistic approach to the program. Just so you know, Ned Pettis of our team, Dr. Ned Pettis, is a 40-year veteran of the fire department. He ended up as the fire chief of the Columbus Fire Department in Ohio. He's got an enormous resume, and he helped us with all of the recommendations and made sure that we were all in the best interest of what the fire department should be. So some of our key engagement objectives were really to look at your current staffing, your facilities, your equipment apparatus, your operations, and some revenues. And we were looking to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of the fire department as it currently stands, as well as accommodate long-term growth. How did we do this? What did we do? We're not from Oak Park. It's a lovely community, by the way. Got to spend some time here. But we looked at some documents and data. We did interviews. We toured the stations. Got to see the facilities. We did an employee survey. We thought it was really important to hear from everybody in the fire department, so we gave everybody a chance to provide their opinions to us. We analyzed the management, service delivery, risk, resources. We did some observations and recommendations, and we provided a report. At the end of this report, we'll do a draft implementation action plan, which we'll give to the village manager, who can then implement these recommendations as you all see fit. So here are some of our major recommendations. You currently staff for 22 people on a shift. If everyone shows up on a day, that's how many you should have. But you have a 16-person minimum. We believe that staffing level is appropriate based on how you deploy your staff and given the call volume that you have, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The department is having a hard time with overtime, but there are a lot of reasons for that. Vacancies, on-the-job injuries, off-the-job injuries, training, all kinds of issues that are not just related to the number of minimum staffing. You have already authorized a process of overhiring. So if you know somebody is going to be retiring in a year, you could start the hiring process and kind of do an overhire to fill those positions, those vacancies more quickly than you would if you waited till somebody actually left the building. You barely just implemented your third ambulance. We think you need a little more data to support whether or not you need that fourth ambulance and when you might need that. You've only been in existence since March, so you don't have enough data to really support another fourth ambulance, in our opinion. We also recommend an internal service fund, is what we call it, which is where you would put money aside from your budget every year to fund large capital equipment assets for the fire department. Fire trucks and engines are very, very expensive, and it's hard to come up with $2 or $3 million at a pop. It's better to save for it long term. We also talked to this is the results kind of of your employee survey. Everybody thinks you've got a great fire department. Nobody within the fire department said, this place is not great. You are everyone is committed. They believe they're well trained. They believe that they provide an extremely high quality level of service to the community. Your employees really are proud that they serve the city of Oak Park and that they serve in the fire department. It was really quite impressive to hear that. They are concerned about overtime. Anecdotally, feeling stressed about it. Some people work a lot of overtime, and that can be a strain on them. Adding a fourth ambulance was talked about here and there, like should we do it, should we not do it? How much are we given to our mutual aid partners? So we think that that's still an issue out there. Facilities are an issue. You all have been to Station 2. You all know what that's about, and I think that's probably one of the biggest concerns from a facility perspective. The other thing that they talked about was lack of a training coordinator. That you've got 70 people in the department, and there's nobody to manage all of the training that is necessary to have a really great firefighting force and paramedics. And so it's really important to have somebody who's on top of that and who can continually monitor that. It's a lot of people to keep track of and all of their certifications that they need to meet state and federal requirements. There's a perceived staffing shortage within the firefighter ranks and the firefighter paramedic ranks. The department is facing significant overtime costs at about $1 million a year, here or there. Facility upgrades, again, the department is, with all those kind of constraints, the department is still providing quality and effective services to the community. And that's hard to hear from the fire department's perspective because they feel like they need more and they could do better if they had more. But they're getting the job done, and they're getting it done well. So those are some of the additional themes. And then the other thing is recruitment delays. It takes a really long time to hire somebody. You've got some interesting laws here in Illinois and processes that you have to go through in order to hire somebody, and that takes a long time. And so that's why we're thinking about keeping the list longer. Keeping it open longer, keeping a year-round recruitment. If you can do some of those things to kind of have a list ready when somebody goes or overhire, so that if you'd be able to then get somebody on board much quicker than you can now. You guys are great with technology. You've been very supportive of the department with technology. They feel like that's been helpful in their job, and we heard a lot about the ECHO program. that has really been something that has really, really helped the firefighters to help people, longer term to get out of whatever situation they happen to be in. So our report focused on 5 main areas: department staffing and personnel, facilities, apparatus and equipment, operations, and revenue and expenditures. And I want to briefly just touch on those items for you. So under department staffing and personnel, we recommend the minimum 16-person staffing. We do recommend that you hire a full-time training officer position. In the report, there's a discussion about a unit hour utilization, which would give you a basis for determining how often a crew is having to go out every day. So if a crew is having to go out 60% of their time or 70% of their time during a shift, that doesn't give them enough time to kind of rest and, kind of decompress a little bit between calls. So this would be a method to kind of get some data behind, are they overworked? Why are they overworked? How many calls are people running in a day? And that could vary between shifts, and it can vary between locations. So that would be a way to kind of begin to get some data. Heard you all talking about data and analytics earlier. That's important. It's an important thing for you all. That might be another data point for you to help you kind of understand what's going on in the fire department at the floor level. There's some facility upgrades that you all are well aware of. And the apparatus, again, we've kind of talked about the 4th ambulance. We also kind of talked about in the report a squad, which would be a 2-person squad that would be available to run out of Station 1 with a engine and the squad and an ambulance, as opposed to running the ladder and an ambulance. Did I get that right? I didn't get that right. 2 ambulances. So it would be a way to not have the ladder truck running every call out of Station 1. That ladder truck is an enormous piece of equipment, and it's your most costly piece of equipment. And to run that thing, that many times a day is really hard wear and tear on that when you don't need that. So this would be available for smaller incidents, things that a ladder truck is not really needed for, would still provide you with enough staffing to address the issue at hand. In operation, we think it's time to do a comprehensive community risk assessment, kind of give you an overall risk. It's been a number of years since you've done one. Continue to expand and support the ECHO program. And there was some discussion about your public education program when it comes to fires. A lot of false alarms, a lot of not knowing when to call the fire department when it's not a really emergency, and you're rolling a ladder and an ambulance out, and it's not an emergency. Somebody doesn't know what they're supposed to be calling for. So public education could really help reduce those kind of non-emergency calls to the fire department. Revenues and expenditures. Workers' compensation is a big issue for you and for many fire departments, in that typically when a firefighter gets hurt, they're not minor injuries. They can be something very significant, and they're out for very long periods of time. In the report, you'll see that in 1 year, I think there were 1,000 days of vacancies due to workers' comp claims. Well, you wonder why there's so much overtime if you've got workers that are hurt, right? And so looking at your workers' comp, looking at injury prevention programs could really help reduce some of that overtime as well. Revenue enhancements are always very unpopular typically with boards, but people who are providing for service, or they're using in 911 inappropriately, or they're taking advantage of your good nature. We talked a little bit about calls for services in assisted living or a nursing home where people have fallen And if they're not really injured, but they come because they want the firefighters to literally pick them up because they don't want their staff doing it. That's not an appropriate use of 911 necessarily. If somebody's injured, obviously you want them to come, but just to pick somebody off the floor because they don't want their staff doing it is something you might want to look at. And also, there's hopefully still grant strategies. How can you get grants for? There's grants for equipment, and sometimes there's grants for personnel. And how do you maximize knowing what's out there and applying for it to offset some of your general fund costs. This is your department staffing, and it's a little small up there. I apologize. It's bigger here. And this is pretty much what you've already seen. This assumes that it's 22 people actually show up to work that day. You could staff the 4th ambulance, or the chief and the battalion chiefs have the option to add somebody to one of the engines if they so choose to do that. So this is what you look like right now. And your staffing levels in the fire department have gone up, what am I looking at? 6 positions total, 6 on the floor. 6 on the floor positions have increased over the last, since 2017. So you've invested in the number of people that are serving the community since 2017, and that has, I'm sure, increased a lot of your ability to respond appropriately and to make sure that people are safe and you're serving the community. Here's your historical operations staff and overtime costs. One of the things I want to share with you on this is overtime in a fire department is never going to go away. This is just not the nature of the beast. And also, the number of people you have assigned to the floor does not necessarily correlate with how much overtime you have. It's really that minimum staffing that you have. The minimum staffing level is going to determine how much overtime you have, and if you're falling below that minimum overtime. Does that make sense? So so adding staff, if you add staff and you increase the minimum staffing, you are automatically going to increase the overtime costs because now you just got to fill more bodies if people are gone. So there is no real correlation, and it doesn't get to the root cause of what causes overtime. Vacancies, just everything we already talked about. So I think it's really important to kind of put that in context, that just because you add staff doesn't mean overtime is miraculously going to go down, because I've never seen it happen, and my colleague Ned Pettis probably has never seen it happen. And I'll give him a chance to speak in a minute if needed. And here's your calls for service. So we have all kind of acknowledged that calls for service are going up. They've gone up every year since 2019 we've got here. So in 2024, you're at 8918. But I think there's a couple of things on this slide that are important to note. One, your EMS calls went down from 23 to 24. But they are, in general, climbing. Service calls have continued to climb. Service calls are those non-emergency calls that the department gets that they still have to respond to. But the really interesting part here is structural fire calls. You had 30 last year. That's not a whole lot. It's not a whole lot. If it's your house that's burning, it's a lot. But overall, in the overall scheme of things, it's not a lot. And so the other thing we did is we put in, okay, what does that mean? How many calls is the fire department running on a daily basis on average? So we just did some simple math, and they've gone from running 20 calls a year to 24 calls a year. That's 3 fire stations, 365 days a year. Doesn't seem like an immense amount of calls. So I think that's something else to take into consideration. And the other thing I wanted to show you here is, you know, when we're talking about structure fires and manning of apparatus with 6 people on an engine and 6 people on a ladder truck, you could not staff. Nobody could afford to staff at those levels for a structure fire that may happen once in a lifetime or once every 5 years. And nor would you want to. You don't operate that way at all. So if you look at that last green line at the very bottom, there's a green line. It says 0.08 in 2024. That's about one structural fire every 12 days. So you have mutual aid. I have a couple of slides here about mutual aid. Mutual aid works well. Fire department does mutual aid like no other type of organization in local government. You know, they know how to help each other. They know when to help each other. They will all send resources in to help. And I think you have to take into consideration mutual aid too when you're talking about how much staff you need to add and why. So we're talking about structural firefighters here. It's very tiny. Non-structure fire service calls, that's kind of that, the service calls, there's 9 of those. And obviously EMS is still only 15 calls a day, 16 calls a day. It's not a ton of calls for a department this size. Response times, one of the things that is not really highlighted in our report is response times. Why? Why would we not talk about response times? Because that seems like that's a big deal, right? Because we looked at the response times and we went, oh, well, your standard is 6 minutes and you're in the 94 percentile most of the time. Gosh, I wish I had been an A student, right? I mean, if you've got those kind of response times, and those response times include not just fire and EMS response, but structural firefighters. So it may take longer to get to a service call response because they're not running lights and sirens when they do with a fire call. So the department has an A, maybe an A- grade in response times. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing to talk about. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing to really improve. That's pretty good. I think any fire department would be proud to have that kind of record. So that's why it's not really too much included in the report as you see it. This is an interesting one too, because one of the things that we talked a lot about with the department, and we heard from everyone we talked to, is this mutual aid. You have shared dispatch. You're still givers. You are giving more mutual aid than you receive. And that's for the last 2 years only. But, again, you're keeping your response rates, but you're still in partnership with your surrounding communities, and you are still providing that level of service to those in Oak Park and those that are also in your surrounding communities. And that's important. It's important to watch. One of the things that I would recommend that you watch over the next year as you're monitoring that third ambulance is how much is that third ambulance really going out of town? Because there was some concern, some anecdotal concerns about, well, we put this third ambulance in and it's going and helping our neighbors because maybe our neighbors don't have the appropriate amount of resources, right? So it's just something to keep an eye on as you monitor whether you want that fourth ambulance or not. Finally, at the end of the day, what we're going to do is we're going to provide the village manager with a implementation action plan, which will help him help you decide which of these recommendations you want to follow, which of them you don't. And those recommendations that you do, he can put a cost to it, person responsible, timelines, so that he can kind of keep track of these recommendations and implement them as you all see fit. And with that, just to highlight again, 16 minimum staffing, a training officer, considering unit hour utilizations for ambulance and fire apparatus. Recruitment needs to be worked on. I think that was key in getting folks on the floor. The fourth ambulance assessment, and explore some funding opportunities for a squad. And now I think with that, that's all I have. Any questions I can answer before?
Does your colleague want us to
Or do
share?
you want to? Oh.
Okay.
Good evening, Madam President and trustee members. I'm Steve Toller. I'm a director with Baker Tilly, and I've been working alongside Miss Donna, wherever Donna is, there she is, for the last, 9 months or so. And some of you I met virtually last year when we were talking about the long-range financial forecast, and we've been supporting Donna from the back end in terms of that. And I know that there's a desire to ultimately present that as part of the budget that you're going to be doing in the near future, so you may be seeing me again. So I've got a lot of information about your financial data, and when this information and this, the proposals came up, you know, the recommendations from Baker Tilly and the recommendations from Local 95, it gave me an opportunity to be able to kind of see what some of those costs were going to be. And so I ran some numbers. Some of you feel finance is not necessarily the most fun in the world, but I'm one of those guys that does. So anyway, so I wanted to try to make some sense of this and help kind of pour into some of the information that we were seeing based on us being so close to some of the numbers. So I just wanted to recap what we heard, and I heard this earlier tonight, and I appreciate you giving that presentation because it helped put some words in there in terms of understanding where you're coming from. But what we understood the union's proposal was to expand really the number of the staffing, the minimum staffing on every apparatus to 4 to be compliant with NFPA 1761. Did I get the right numbers? Okay, pretty close, right? Okay. And you know, to get up to the place where you're 2 in and 2 out on each apparatus. And if that's the case, going from 3 to 4, that's an additional person on each engine, as they indicated to you. That's 9 medics total, right? 3 apparatus, 3 additional staff on each in 3 shifts. So in order to address that, we spoke with the chief to understand what the need was in terms of staffing and being able to handle command on that side. And in fact, even in light of what the union had indicated is that there would be 1 command aide. The chief believes that really position needs to be a lieutenant, not a firefighter paramedic, but it needs to be somebody that's in a command level to be able to help provide direction and oversight. And so given that, we're talking about 9 firefighter medics plus another 3 lieutenants that would need to be coming on board. But then there's also some additional one-time and recurring needs that will be needed. There needs to be some upgrades. You need to be able to house the additional people into some bedrooms so that, in one of the stations. And even though Station 2 is the one that you're talking about in terms of needing some facility upgrades, it would be that one that would have to be required to make sure that there was a couple of additional bedrooms there. And then you also have some recurring costs, additional turnouts, food reimbursements while they're on site, and then other supplies. On top of that, as we understood it, is that it was an additional, moving up from 4 minimum staffing to 6. And that would need an additional 2 FTE per apparatus per shift. So 4 times 3 times 2 is, so it's actually an additional 2 people per shift. Plus we're adding another engine of 6. So 18 medics would be required for the existing apparatus, plus 18 firefighter medics for the new 3rd engine, because you need 6 FTE then for 3 shifts running that, right? So we're talking 36 additional staff there. But to my understanding, and in conversations that we've had with Ned Pettis, it's hard to find any agency in the United States at a city level that's running 6 at that level.
And so that creates a whole new dynamic in terms of span of control and in terms of really how the organizational structure is able to address that. And at a minimum, it would probably require an additional 6 command level staff to be able to address something like that. On top of that, you're going to have some one-time and recurring costs. I asked the chief to find out if it was possible to retrofit the existing apparatus to house 6 people in one apparatus. It just doesn't have the capacity to do that. It would be so expensive that most of the places would just say, you know what, we're not going to do that. We'll just sell you a new one. And so you have to look at a rig that would be probably in excess of about $3 million each to be able to support that number of people within a rig. Plus, you've got the turnouts and the food and reimbursements and some other things that you'll need for not only the additional staff, but also the new apparatus. So, again, to recap, we're talking 12 FTE would be the short-term phase 1 is what I was calling it. And then the long-term would be 36 plus an additional people, probably at least 6, to be able to deal with span of control issues and address the organizational structure within the department. So you're talking an additional at least 42 new people for that second phase. So we're talking another 54 people here that you would have to hire to do that. So then we did is we said, okay, what does this cost, right? So we took a look at the personnel costs. I got information from Donna and her team and Kira and her team in terms of some of the salary as well as the benefits. And one of the things that we saw in the labor's analysis of this was an amount that appeared to be what the salary costs were. But you have to include all the benefits on that. So we have to include the health insurance for each of the individuals. Pension costs, of which your pension costs are on average about 15% for your normal cost. That's not addressing any unfunded actuarial liability. I know that that's something that's not necessarily of great interest to most people with that, but suffice it to say that to put money aside so that a firefighter, an employee has their money for their defined benefit plan by the time they retire, you have to put in 15% of what their salary costs are. Plus you have some other fringe. So basically you're talking about $179,000, about $180,000 for a firefighter paramedic, and about just over $200,000 for a lieutenant. All of these slides that are coming up here, you know, my math teachers used to tell me, show your work. So I'm showing you the work, but I'm just going to give you the high level about what it basically says. And when you plug all the numbers in terms of the additional staffing, what their cost is on a per person basis, and run that, you're talking about an additional $2.2 million of additional personnel costs, plus another less than $100,000 for the annual incremental operating costs. So we're really talking about $2.3 million. Now, one of the key differences that I noticed with what I saw from what the local had put together versus this analysis is that there's a baked-in assumption here. And a key assumption from my perspective was understanding that you're trying to look towards minimum staffing and that each rig would have to have 4 as their minimum staffing. It's not 3. It's not staffing up to 4 and then allowing somebody to, call in sick, if you will. It's staffing at 4. And given that, there would not be any overtime savings from our perspective, from based on what I was hearing with that, because you're having to staff up to 4. You're staffing to 3 right now. So anyway, so it's $2.3 million on an annual basis for the short-term proposal. And then when you add the second phase in where you're adding the additional 2 people per apparatus, plus adding a new engine, you're talking about close to $8 million of additional annual operating costs for that. And then on top of that, you'll probably have at least $15 million in one-time capital costs because you'll have to replace out all that apparatus to seat 6 people in it. And so we're talking about at least $3 million for each of those. You'd need to replace all 4 because, as the chief found out, nobody's going to want to touch trying to reconfigure the existing rigs to fit 6 people on it. And so we're talking about, net there, about $10 million after you, do some trade-in allowance with some of that. So it's about $15 million of additional one-time costs that you'll have to figure in. So about $10 million for the total proposal, as we understood it, 2.3 for that first phase or the short-term recommendation. Plus then on top of that, you're going to have a fixed cost of $15 million. That $10 million, though, to the point that Carol made earlier about setting money aside in an internal service fund to build money up in advance, you're talking about $12 million of investment in just those rigs, not including all the ambulances that you already have and the other equipment that's needed to run the fire department. You're talking at least about $1.5 million that you would have to put in, maybe even $2 million to really make sure that you're proactively funding that. So really the cost ends up being about $12 million on an annualized basis. So what are the takeaways of this? The cost of the additional staffing really needs to be weighed against some of the data that you heard being shared by both Local 95 as well as Baker Tilly in terms of what is the risk that we're trying to mitigate here in this community? What is the level of service that you're trying to provide? There was a conversation about 6 minutes of response time that we analyzed that indicated about, the A- level, is that what you said, Carol? 99, 95% or so. I know the local IAFF was indicating a 4-minute standard, which is promulgated by some of the standard setting agencies, right? What is the level of service you want to provide? Is it 4 minutes or is it 6 minutes? And those come with significant dollar costs, as you can see here, in terms of trying to hit to those levels. I think the long-term staffing proposals, have the potential to outpace really your existing capacity infrastructure. And that's not only the physical infrastructure of your facilities, but as well as your management infrastructure. And you'll have to take another look at really how does the organization need to be able to manage that level of staffing. And then finally is just, how will those one-time recurring expenses have an impact on the general fund and your solvency and the sustainability initiatives that your manager was talking with you about earlier. So I kind of highlighted this as I went through it, but I just wanted to, capture what the differences were that I saw in terms of what the cost analysis was. And it's that, 9 firefighters for the short-term piece that would fulfill NFP 1710. I got it right that time, right? And that really is the minimum staffing level. It gets up to 4 on a minimum as a minimum staffing. And so we just don't see that overtime is going to drop as a result of that. So you're really looking at what the incremental cost is for your staff. And to Carol's point about, when you add more staff, there's the potential that overtime could increase. And that's a distinct possibility as well. But when you set a level and a standard of a certain number of minimum staffing for each apparatus, and that's what you're going to live by, you're going to have to figure out a way to be able to fill that back. So anyways, we're talking about $12 million, not necessarily the $200,000 or the $500,000 impact. And let me just leave you with some closing thoughts, and then we'll step back and see if you have any questions. But I would encourage you, based on all the work that I've been doing with your agency here for the last several months on the long-range financial plan, as well as the work that we've done with agencies across Illinois, across the United States, is really look long-term. Anything that we're talking about in this area like this, service expansion, and not just for fire, I'm talking about anything that you're looking in terms of expanding services. Make sure that you have the resources to be able to pay for that long-term. Don't just look at the next year, and make sure that you're not setting yourself up for a long-run costs by anticipating or using one-time savings that you might have or one-time funding sources. Really look towards that concept of fiscal sustainability. Ensure that you have the stable revenue streams to be able to afford anything that you're looking to do to meet that need. And to the extent that you can't find additional revenues to be able to support something like, a service expansion, you're going to have to make choices. And then they might be priority-based choices, right, in terms of what are we going to be funding. So just think about that, and really that ultimately comes down to, as you have conversations in this next 30 days about your proposed budget for 26, just make sure it connects with your priorities. So I know it all sounds like a mom pie, apple and Chevrolet, right? I mean, it's the basics, right? But it's something to really think about because you all are in a very important position of having to make those key choices for the agency and for your community. So with that, I'm going to step back, and we'll be all of us are happy to entertain any questions you have. So thanks.
Thank you, Brian.
The the current 16-person minimum manning standard, that is a minimum manning standard that's set at a policy level by the village, correct? If there were to be additional hiring, but there were no increase to the minimum manning standard, what would the anticipated impact on overtime be in that case?
From a fiscal perspective, right, because that's why I'm coming up. So. And I'll give this to you as an example from my own experience. I worked with an agency where we had a minimum staffing of 3 per apparatus, but we chose as an agency, and this was in California, to hire an additional 2 that were floats for any one shift. So here you have 3 apparatus. We have 9 as our minimum, right? But we actually hired 11. And what it did is it helped us to reduce some of the overtime costs that we were experiencing. The problem is that when we made that decision, it was at a point where pension costs were very low. And then I don't know if you've heard, but you probably are. California's pension costs went through the roof. And each person was now costing us an additional 75% in overhead costs based on their salary. And it ended up becoming an issue about, is it cheaper to have overtime, but not burn our people out? And so it was that continual balance. So to the point that you, and the question that you made, is that if you add additional staffing, it has the potential to be able to provide those extra 2 floats, if you will, or however many floats that you have, if your minimum doesn't change. So there's the potential that it could end up saving that. But what you're doing is you're adding one-time incremental costs of health insurance and all these other things that somebody has. But you also have this issue that you have to address about the strain that's being placed on your employees.
In your analysis, still on the fiscal side, you used as a salary $125,000 for a firefighter paramedic. Is that am I reading that correctly?
Right there. Yep.
What is that based on?
Yeah, that's based on the base salary for a firefighter paramedic position. We looked at all of the employees that you currently have, and we chose a top quartile number because we weren't just focused on what the first year cost is, we're trying to look at the long-term cost. And so when you look at your current employee data set of all the employees that you have and what their base salary is and all of the salary-like, other things that they might have, certifications and other things perhaps that they're getting compensated in, that's what's baked into that salary amount.
So my understanding is that our most senior firefighters are earning less than that right now as base salary. Most senior firefighters in the range of $123,000 for 2026 or 2027.
I don't know if either Keya or Donna want to speak to any of that or even.
2027 base salary for firefighter will be $117,000, and there will be paramedic stipend on top of it and possibly longevity, but that's in 2 years from now. Currently, I believe that low number to firefighter base salary is $111,000 for this year.
Okay, so for 100, that 117 you said?
2 years. That's what 2026 increase and 2027 increase.
Okay.
It'll be at a base salary of $117,000 in 2027.
Is that for the most senior or most junior?
That's the base. That's when they reach their top out pay in 2027.
So in 2027 they top out.
They top out it, and that would be like a 10-year firefighter paramedic. Yes.
So the 125,000 number is near our most senior
I think that might be a little bit high at this point, but, yeah, that would be like a 20-year firefighter paramedic.
And fresh recruit, like a first-year firefighter is something more in the range of 80,000?
About 78,000 this year, correct.
So, I think that's one of the things I'm thinking of when I'm looking at this, and sort of what is our distribution of seniority right now in the department? How many are at that 10-year plus?
We're very much a younger department right now. I don't have the exact distribution, but most of our firefighters are falling between the 5 and 15-year range. But I would say even between 1 and 10 is the most likely.
So, I mean, I think that as I'm looking at the fiscal analysis, I think, what we heard tonight from the firefighters is their request is for additional hiring, but not increasing the minimum manning standard. Did I understand that correctly?
The typical, in all my years, I've negotiated 6 contracts with the village, and we've only negotiated minimum manning through negotiations. So there has been no proposal from the union for any minimum manning increase at this time.
Okay.
And let me just speak to it from that perspective. Is really that when I reviewed their presentation, I saw most of it talking about minimum staffing at 4, 2 in, 2 out. There was a lot of conversation about that. And so when I ran the numbers, it was my understanding that the proposal was for a minimum of 4, not to, I saw it on the one slide in terms of one of those slides, but the rest of the slides all indicated a minimum of 4 per. And so I ran the numbers based on assuming that we're looking at 4 for each apparatus. So that's how the numbers were run. So, yeah.
Sure. And I would say that, we've talked about the hiring practices that are, with the firefighter recruitment and such that's going on right now. We're not going to even meet those type of hiring numbers for probably maybe 2027 to even reach that. I think it's very much a negative. You're going against what we were trying to accomplish, is to hire the people and then maybe have those discussions, build that data going forward and see that reduction in overtime, see the reduction in injuries. Because that is very much, I don't agree with Baker Tilly when they say it's a perceived shortage in the department. It is a shortage in the department. Your call volume is up, your overtime's up, and your injuries are up. Yet they're saying maintain a minimum of 16. That number's not working. So we want to see that number at the top go up and build data from there. And then we can have those discussions with the village. Like I said, it's always been through negotiations. And that's the way we see it.
Chief, one of the assumptions here was that if we're adding one firefighter paramedic at each station, it would mean that we would also need to be adding an additional lieutenant. I guess, can you help me understand why we would need to be adding an additional lieutenant to each shift if we're adding one firefighter paramedic at each station?
Sure. Good evening, JT Terry, Fire Chief. That goes towards the long and the short-term goal, the 2 phases, if you will. So the command aide was originally put on as a firefighter paramedic, which is how you get up to the 12 requested. Looking at when you have a 6-person rig, our policy, the way we operate now, is our ambulances are part of the fire crew when they're dispatched. That's our SOP, and that's how we would operate. So that would bring your crew up to 8. Little bit different than NFPA, but we are NIMS compliant. Incident ICS is how we not only operate within our department, but also within the village. Span of control there limits in this particular case, would be a lieutenant or a battalion chief at the incident command level to 5. So if you're going to have a crew now of 8, where you would marry the ambulance crews with the engine, we're outside of span of control. So now we're putting our leadership in a position of failure. So, and when looking at that command aid, it would have to be an officer then to split crews and change our SOPs, and that's how we ended up at the lieutenant position.
So if you're adding 3 per shift, where you're not going to 6 on a rig, the command aid isn't necessary because you have then 4 per apparatus plus the ambulance responding. So you've got a command aid and 5 firefighter paramedics responding. Is that correct?
So you would have the company officer on the fire rig and then 2 on the ambulance. So that would bring your crew to 6, would be at the limit of what ICS would recommend for span of control in an emergency situation. I would just like to touch on something that was brought up also in terms of the ambulances are definitely the busiest vehicles in town. We looked at data for the past 2 years, and there were only 4 structure fires in the Village of Oak Park where the ambulances were not dispatched from the fire station at that time. They were dispatched from the hospital and did join the fire companies on scene. So that's a point that definitely needed attention, and it was followed up on in terms of, keeping NFPA compliance with 5-person companies.
Understood. I guess there's still the fact that for structure fires that are responded to out of Station 2, the ambulances are then coming from Station 1, and so
Yes, sir. That is a limitation that the station needs to be addressed. That physically we cannot put another vehicle up there. So that's kind of a constant across both studies.
In the Baker-Tilly study, there's a recommendation regarding a 2-person squad vehicle, and you discussed that recommendation briefly. Can you talk about what a little bit more about what the need for that 2-person response vehicle is and what the staffing requirements would be?
Sure. First of all, everyone with the Village of Oak Park Fire Department is a paramedic. So this rig would be an ALS equipped rig with paramedics would be able to respond to all EMS calls in the Village of Oak Park. So very basic. It would be out of Station 1. So it would take all EMS calls in the trucks district, which as noted earlier is the central part of town. It involves a lot of our calls. They would also pick up a couple calls. They would reduce some of the wear and tear on engine 602 and engine 603. So across the board, you're reducing expense on our vehicles. And it also gives one more level of redundancy in terms of response when a vehicle is out, should we catch a structure fire or a vehicle is out on mutual aid. It also will partner well with ECHO and some of our other alternative response because it's a lighter, more maneuverable vehicle that when responded to, say, someone in the midst of a mental crisis doesn't see this huge rig coming down at them. It'll be a smaller, more maneuverable and a quieter rig that can work with our partners a little bit better than bringing that most expensive vehicle in the village out all the time.
So recommendation 14 relates then to potential hiring of 6 new firefighter paramedics?
Yes, sir.
So the difference then between recommendation 14 and the recommendation in the firefighters study is 3 additional firefighter paramedics.
And additional service to the Village of Oak Park in bringing the squad and a reduction in wear and tear on the truck in the central district and wear and tear on the engines on the north and the south district.
Okay, I think that covers it for me right now. I think I definitely, when we had this conversation a year ago, I made a motion to hire 3 additional firefighter paramedics at that point, and we heard that we were going to be doing a staffing study. I mean, I think the staffing study has a recommendation to look at funding opportunities and staffing requirements for hiring 6 additional from the Baker-Tilly study. From the firefighter study, there's a recommendation to hire 9 additional firefighter paramedics. I mean, I think at the very least, there's there's strong alignment that hiring additional staff while not increasing minimum manning could have significant benefits. I think there's alignment here. I guess I would have maybe one additional question on overtime reduction, because I'm sorry, I'm really bad with names. Carol, you spoke a little bit to things that reduce overtime use, and one of the things I think we've heard from the firefighters is significant overtime leads to exhausted workers, which maybe leads to more workers' comp claims. And in your experience, have you seen that additional staffing, so long as it isn't coupled with additional increases in minimum manning that reflect that additional staffing, bring down overtime?
You are the first agency that I've seen that doesn't have a minimum manning requirement in their MOUs. So I do not have any experience with that scenario that you just described. I don't know if Ned is on he's our fire chief. If he has any experience with that, but I don't have any experience. It's typically, if you increase staffing, you increase minimum manning, and that's why it's always chasing each other. Ned, are you there? Or did Ned go to sleep? He's in the East Coast.
We have some recent information on our claims experience. I think our claims have been going down recently.
Village manager said your claims were going down. We also think, you've implemented things like the electronic gurneys and pieces of equipment that help people from getting injured. I think those are things that should be explored as well, making sure that they have the right equipment to make sure that they're less likely to hurt themselves. Training, injury and illness and prevention, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe Terry could speak to kind of what we've been doing to address that, and what the prospective perspective is on addressing that, and also acknowledging that our claims have actually been going down over the last couple of years.
Yes, thank you. In regards to what Carol was talking about, the striker contract that we entered into last year, the 10-year lease, we did for several reasons. One, safety first and foremost. Just to kind of really dig down into it, the striker contract is the power cot, the power load. So now we have battery power to lift the patient up, and then the power load actually gets them into the vehicle. So again, reducing back strain and lifting. And then that striker contract, as of last year, also got some of the electric chairs that help the firefighters and the paramedics move people up and down the stairs. We traditionally have struggled with the pie-shaped stairs in some of the older buildings in Oak Park. So we acknowledge that, and we look for technology to kind of leverage ways to reduce that. So not only are we using the technology, but we went out and talked to the vendor to buffer the village from price increases with that also. In terms of training, we train regularly. This is a dangerous job, but having the third ambulance definitely reduces some of the load on the paramedics that are out on the calls regularly. And again, the training with the new equipment coupled together, we acknowledge that it is a dangerous job, but we continue to do the best we can to buffer against that. So.
Thank you. And actually, just one extra data point to add into the conversation. I went back and looked at the 2000 and let's see, it was the budget from 2010, and it had the FTE staffing levels in the fire department dating back to 2008 and 2008 had 72 FTEs in the fire department, 5 of them being administrative. So it's just as a note that while staffing has increased over the sort of the last decade, while call volumes have been increasing, staffing is still, historically at roughly the same level it was 20 years ago, and my understanding is staffing was at one point substantially higher. So I mean, I'm just throwing that out there from we're looking at a small slice of history when we're talking about staffing levels going up, but call volumes have been going up for years, and we haven't necessarily been increasing staff as we look at sort of historical levels.
Yeah, I think that's true, and we can actually follow up and provide the village board with some data, not only the fire department, but also like the police department, the entire village, because you'll probably see that the numbers have shrank quite a bit pre-recession, post-recession, and yes, we've had some restoration recently in recent history, but it's been marginal compared to where we were as an organization pre-recession. So you'll see that I think the police force was larger, community relations was larger, the whole village was larger.
So kind of like a fundamental question, and I think I might want to call on a few folks to come about this, but it seems to me that this NFPA 1710 is like the crux of the disagreement about numbers. Like the Local 95 used it, and it looks like Baker Tilly did not. And you referenced it, but it doesn't sound like it was not a standard you applied in your report. So I'm just curious, why? Like, why are we using it? Why are we not using it? So maybe, if the Baker Tilly folks want to speak first, and then, I'll want to hear from you guys too.
We certainly did include, we looked at NFPA 1710, in a number of ways, making sure that our understanding of it, there's a couple of things. One is what is safest for the firefighters in the community, and 2 in, 2 out was what was important to us for firefighter safety. And you have 5 people showing up on every call. So you have 2 in and 2 out plus 1. So we did take that into consideration. Do those 4 people have to be on one rig? No, we don't believe they do. And I think there's other parts of 1710 that, if you read down a little bit further, would make that argument. But the other thing is, in my experience in dealing with fire departments, 1710 is the gold standard. If you have more money than you know what to do with, wouldn't everybody like more staff, right? And so we really tried to couch that with the financial needs of Oak Park. You just don't have a fire department. You provide so many services to the community, and as a former finance director, I know that 4 people on every rig is going to break the bank. And it will break your bank no matter how much money you have eventually, because it's so expensive. And you don't have the facilities, and you don't have the rigs. You have the rigs for 4, you don't have the rigs for 6. And so we considered it. We didn't quote it. We didn't think it was necessary to quote it. But we do highly value firefighter safety and community safety, and by having 5 people show up on a call, we believe you're covered. Obviously, the association's got a different opinion, but that's ours.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'd love to hear from you all, and also just hear a little bit more. I think I might have. I'm just curious who what other municipalities, what other fire departments are following, the same standard? I'd be curious to know who is following it. I understand it seems aspirational. It seems like I love data standard. I love that there's a measure where we're holding ourselves up to, and so I guess I just want to understand the reality of that. Are we trying to hit that aspiration, or how many different departments actually do to hit that standard? So to the degree you can, to speak to that would be very helpful.
If I could just jump back and just some institutional knowledge of the history of the Oak Park Fire Department. There was a time when we had 2 people on a fire rig, and we were fortunate that nothing came of it, but buildings were lost because of the safety factor, and that's how we ended up at 3. Just to kind of give a background of where we are. In terms of 1710 and looking at the entire chapter of NFPA, I think it's important to recognize what a company is, and as was touched on in one of the studies, a company is people dispatched together, arriving together, and operating under one officer. And our SOPs is we do that, and we do that to maintain compliance with 1710. I think it's also important that 1710 recognizes mutual and automatic aid to increase the number of firefighters needed, and again, the 3 categories of a fire. So when we look at 1710, when we build our box cards, which is where we get our help from, and where we provide help, we look at the location of those individuals. Mavis Division 11 is where we operate. River Forest, Forest Park, Cicero, Berwyn, North Riverside, and Stickney, very close. One challenge that we do have is bordering Chicago. A very good fire department, a different Mavis division, but we are 3-sided in that regard. So again, 1710 covers not only the number of people that may be on a rig, but how you get to that safe number. And this is part of the reason we went away from 2-person rigs, because that's not safe, and that's not something that we're going to tolerate in this fire department. So 1710 is definitely very important to us, and that's how we got to where we are with 3 individuals.
Yeah, you're correct, Derek. The NFPA was a big crux of our study. We were trying to go off of, the IAFF goes off of national standards. We tried to be very data-driven. For a lot of years, we kind of argued with feelings when we were trying to get more staffing. We feel more tired. We feel like we need more. And then we hit a turning point where that wasn't working, so we turned to data. And this is all this staffing study was going off of data. National standard is there for a reason. You're right, it is the gold standard. 6 firefighters on each rig is especially aspirational. That's why the short-term staffing recommendation is 4 and not 6, because we think that's something that you can reach. We do have most of the facilities for firefighters. Yes, a bedroom would have to be added to Station 2. There's 3 bedrooms there, but 1 bed would have to be added for 4 firefighters to be at that station. All the other stations have enough bedding and all of the other things. All the vehicles are equipped to handle 4 firefighters. As far as who is doing 4 firefighters, there are a few departments. There is not a ton. Oak Lawn is one. I know DeKalb, I believe, is aspiring to do that or are close to it. Chicago definitely has 4 to 5 firefighters on each rig, I believe. But there's not a ton, but that is also something that's unique to us, that our population density is so high. The division's population density is so high, so Berwyn, Cicero, us, Forest Park, River Forest. We have, I think, the highest population density in the state as a division. I believe Berwyn and Cicero are numbers 1 and 2 in the state. We're number 6, I believe. So those hazards are there. High rises are unique to our community in the division, and those require the most firefighters to handle. So that's really why we turn to NFPA for those standards. Yes, there might not be a lot of departments doing it, but we have some unique challenges that means we should. As far as company in NFPA standard, they do address this, as Carol said, later on, and there's an explanatory section of NFPA 1710 in the back. It is very specific that those rigs need to operate continuously together at all times. Our vehicles do not do that. Ambulance 611 might go to the hospital, and then 631 might go back to the house. They don't follow to the hospital on every call, and they don't operate under that one supervisor specifically all day. There are exceptions. One of them is cited as a pumper-tanker option for like rural operations. So basically 2 different vehicles, one pumps the water, one holds a lot of water for a rural department, can join up and create one company because they need the 2 vehicles to operate together. And that's what the NFPA exceptions are for, things like that. but they're very specific that they must operate together at all times.
Appreciate that. I think while we have you up here, I'm curious. There was another point that was made around the budgeting. Specifically the overtime point seems to be a pretty important one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious your reaction to that analysis. Obviously, y'all have budgeting experience. You guys are doing what you know best, right? But I'm just curious, your reaction to that, because it seems that's also a huge issue, a huge disagreement between these two presentations. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I do not have a finance background. I am a fireman. I did the best I could with the data that I was presenting. I do stand behind what I said about overtime costs. The thing is, if we have a minimum staffing of 16 and we start like we do right now with 22 firefighters, we have 2 Kelly days and 3 vacation slots each day. So that's 5 people off the majority of the year. So you go right from 22 to 17, one above minimum. Now we have 1 sick day, 1 injury, which we almost always have long-term injuries. Currently, we're 4 firefighters short from hiring issues. So my shift specifically has 2 firefighters down. So each day, my shift starts at 15 right now. So right now, we have overtime each day just based off of our staffing. We have 1 injury, so now we're at 14. So now there's 2 overtime slots each day for me. So if you were to add 3 people to my shift right now we'd be back to that 17. We would not be having that overtime every day. I can't guarantee exactly what the overtime savings would be because more injuries could happen, less injuries can happen. But I can say that in 2024, when I calculated this data out, that's how we did it. We went day by day, said there's 3 overtime slots, 2 overtime slots, 1 overtime slot. If I put 3 people in that position because I had them hired, that would have eliminated those 3 overtime slots. So I do stick behind that data.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've had a lot of questions, a lot of analysis. Jim, anything further?
I have a few comments and a couple questions, I guess. So,
Okay,
you mind?
no.
So I don't understand still why we don't utilize an engine in downtown Oak Park. I don't know why that is. It seems like that would be a big need in that area, and I think we have spare engine, do we not? But, yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. Currently, we do have 2 reserve engines. Yes, sir. Staffing is the reason why, and that's just what we've been talking about the whole day is the reason why, and just something with that would add the lieutenant.
Okay.
And to get that up and running.
Okay, so I'm hearing a lot of differences tonight, and this gentleman, I'm sorry, I don't think I've met you before. Yes, Steve. I appreciate your analysis. It arrived totally too late for anyone to give it serious consideration or serious thought tonight. And I'd suggest if you are going to send us something, we have ample time to review it. And unfortunately, I don't think any of us did because I walked in tonight and it may have come late in the day, I don't know. But I just looked at it, so I'm looking at it as you're speaking. It's not a good way to do it from my perspective as a trustee, to give it justice, right, to give it its due. I just want to mention that I'm hearing some differences of opinion. And I think I just want to ask the chief here. Chief, these firefighters, these men here that came here tonight, they look to your leadership to provide safety for the residents, safety for themselves as firefighters, safety for our community as a whole. And I know you have also are concerned of our fiscal responsibility. As a chief, you have a department to manage. Basically, what I'm asking is, where do you fall on this? You're hearing some differences of staffing opinions.
Sure.
You're the chief. You provide the leadership for this department. I think this group here respects your opinion, and we look to you to get that direct input. Where do you fall on these? We're hearing differences here. So
Sure.
Where do you fall?
My opinion was presented to Manager Jackson within the budget in terms of we are getting more calls. The bulk of what we do is EMS and service related. The challenge that I was presented with is reducing the wear on the vehicles. coming up through the Oak Park Fire Department and staying up overnight and being forced back, I know what that's like. I know what that does to the person. I know what that does to their family. And with all of that in mind, the squad, as I see it now, out of Station 1, meets the most of these needs of the Oak Park Fire Department. It increases the individuals there to make calls. It provides more to the community. It reduces the wear on these vehicles, and it gives us the opportunity to collect the more data, because we are going to run more EMS calls. The emotion that was raised last year by Trustee Straw in terms of the 4th ambulance and where we're going, that's down the road. You know, I can't tell you when that is, but calls are going to continue to come. And what we need to do as an organization is find out is the most efficient way to answer these calls in the safest way for the men and women of the Oak Park Fire Department and provide the best service for the residents and the visitors of Oak Park. So where I stand now, sir, is the budget that was presented to Manager Jackson.
I haven't seen it, so I don't know. I don't know what that is. You would have to fill us in on that, perhaps.
You will get it within a week.
I know we will.
Yes.
But
Yes.
he's talking about a certain number of staff members. I think that's something which the chief could speak on, right?
So I think I considered, so I think what he's speaking to is what the recommendation in the report relating to the squad, right? And so the squad, and I think the Baker-Tilly report acknowledges that if you have the funding, that we would recommend the addition of the squad. So when you think about the budget in that context, if you have the funding, then he would recommend, that was part of his recommendation. So I think you'll see that articulated through the budget process. You'll get an update on our revenue situation. You'll get an update on our current base budget and the expenditures related to that and the gap they're related. And you'll also get the list of all the other board priorities that are not unfunded structurally in the context of all the fire recommendations that are coming forward. So you will have all that information.
Well, we'll have to see that. I do value greatly the idea that the firefighters are, they're run, you know, in a very difficult situation with the overtime, and it's just as a business owner, you don't want to have a business where you fund your operation through as much overtime as I think this department is being run on right now, and that's just not good for any employee. And I wouldn't do that for my business, and my employees aren't out saving lives, okay, and putting out fires. They're just operating some equipment, which is very sensitive, but it's not life and death. So I'm concerned about that. I see this, and I think it's something that does need addressing. I'm trying to get my mind around all these things that are coming at us at the last minute. So I will continue to consider that, but and I will look at the recommendations that are in the budget and think very carefully about those things. But I do feel like that is a situation that should not continue to run that amount of overtime. There's got to be a way, and it doesn't. And I don't believe it's a $20 million problem. So you can't convince me that it's going to take that kind of investment to turn that around. So I think we need to look at this very hard and very carefully as a board, and I think we will.
Trustee Taglia, if I may, just real quick, this is not an Oak Park problem. The state legislation is actually aware of this problem, and the eligibility and the way people are hired is actually changing with some House bills that were recently passed, and there's some very educated people sitting in this room here that understand a lot of that, and we're working together. And you know, in the coming years, in the coming months and years, you will see how firefighter and paramedics are hired in the Village of Oak Park is going to be different than their traditional list, expired, start again. So again, I don't have that information right now, but just know that again, this isn't an Oak Park problem, and a lot of people are working on how we get good, qualified candidates in any department, especially in Oak Park. So that's on the mind of a lot of people right now.
Well,
and recruitment is, I think is the primary point. I mean, when you look at our claims history, it's down. It's more than 50% less than it was now than the claims were in 2022. but yet the overtime is the same. So we have four vacancies
Yes,
right
sir,
now.
four.
Is that correct?
That is.
Yeah, so I think the recruitment piece is a big piece, and there is a recommendation, I think, in the Baker-Tilly report, as well as coming from the chief, that we've discussed, that relates to state legislation that was recently adopted.
Yes, sir.
That will help.
Very good, thank you. Go ahead.
All right, any further questions? Corey?
Thank you, all of you all who've worked on both of these reports and have given us great answers to the questions that have been raised tonight. So I really appreciate that. So a couple questions that I have, and I'm not sure that the data given tonight will sufficiently answer my question, but maybe there's general knowledge in this room full of very capable experts who might know. So when I look at the overtime costs, started in 2019, we've got about 400,000, and it doubles, or more than doubles, up to like $1 million, and then kind of stays there a little bit, and kind of increases again in 2023 to about 1.2, and then now is projected down to about 800,000. I'm wondering, do we have a plotting of injuries and workman's comp along to see stacked alongside that overtime figure, so that we can see how the correlation between how much extra overtime and man hours we're asking our staff to put in, and the direct cause or lack of cause, if there isn't one, to injuries and workman's comp claims and so on and so forth.
That is definitely something that we can get to you, sir.
Yes, we can, and that's what I was trying to indicate. The claims are going down, but the overtime is still stagnant.
Okay.
Yeah.
With training.
Okay, yeah, so I'd like to see that when we come back to talk about this again. What I've heard echo across both studies is the vacancy issue. I really think no matter what we do, ultimately, and I know, Chief, you just mentioned the state's changing the way that hiring does and everything. I'd like to have two plans, one based on the state actually doing what they're saying they're going to do, and one if the thing never makes it out of committee, right? And we have to adapt based on it not happening, right? Because we've got, I guess, 3 open positions currently? Four.
Yes, sir, 4.
Okay, 4 open positions currently, and we're talking about hiring either 6 to 9 more, right? And we don't have the positions that are already budgeted and allotted filled. I think that is something that we can fix, and that should be fixed, right? We shouldn't. I think this conversation would be a lot more grounded, right? Like if we had all those positions filled, and we're saying, okay, so this is what we look like with a full staff. These are our numbers. This is why we're saying we need to do this other thing. Right now, everything we're looking at is we're down 4 people already, and that's we just shouldn't. I'd like us not to be down 4 people. So that would be one. I would like to see that, like a comprehensive plan to address that. How much of this is? So what I'm looking at in the Baker-Tilly report, there's response times under 6 minutes, and those routinely hit 90%, 90% plus across the number of years that they surveyed. That alone, though, doesn't tell the complete picture. It just shows, like, we got people on there. It doesn't say how many people we got there under 6 minutes, and doesn't say the outcome of the actual engagement and whether or not it was satisfactory or whether or not it met what our internal benchmarks are for what that type of response should be. So I think I'd like to see context around that, because I'd like to know if we're hitting the numbers that our internal our benchmarks are, right? Like what's the standard that we uphold for ourselves, and are we hitting those numbers? And when we're not, why not? So we don't have that information with us tonight. And then I wonder too, like, there's a couple things when we start thinking about, how quote-unquote accidents happen, right? And accidents could be anything. It's not necessarily just related to fire. It could be in any system, right? So it's an unwanted outcome. There's a couple different things we have, right? You got the environment, which you can't change, right? And then you got hazards, which you can. And I'm wondering how much of us, if we're doing well, how much is it luck that the environment hasn't turned against us versus managing the hazards that pop up that we may or may not be able to do because we're short-staffed all the time, right? And so have we just been running good? Oh, is it 10?
But you have a minute and a half, but
All right.
entertain a motion to move past 10 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, how much of this is us running good, right? Like, you know, I'm a bit of a poker player, right? So sometimes you sit down at the card table and, you know, the cards are hitting and you're good, and you're good. Doesn't really matter how you play. Like, you're just getting hit with the deck, and sometimes you're not. And then it really does matter how you play.
It does. It matters a lot. And it matters a lot because if we fail, and when we fail, people get hurt.
Right.
And if I fail, the people that trust me, you know, as Trustee Taglia said, that means I fail. So that has to do with the training department. That has to go out with finding the right equipment. That has to do with replacement cycles. And that has to do with when people do get hurt, hard conversations. You know, what happened? I mean, we work in dangerous environments. You know, we signed up, we agree, we swore we would go in and get people out of dangerous environments. And things happen, yes, and that's unfortunate. But, you know, today with the technology that we have, whether it's a thermal imaging camera, whether it's the ability to dump every single call in Excel spreadsheet and sort it every single way to find out what happened, you know, that's where the training department and a training officer and, you know, hard conversations happen to avoid that. But the unfortunate part is, you know, when people get hurt, how can we avoid that? And more importantly, how do we treat them when they get hurt? You know, what can we do as a department in a village to take care of our employees? What can we do as a department in a village and add alternative response such as ECHO so that people don't have to keep calling? Because people call 911 when they don't know what else to do, you know, and that's just where the world is now, but we shouldn't have to go as firefighters to help, you know, pick up somebody when there are organizations and networks that can get them the help that they need. Because in all honesty, the hospital isn't the answer for everything, but that's where part of the fire service is right now. And we're trying to get out of that and do better for people. So sometimes we are in luck and we'll take it when we can get it.
Right.
But realizing that we have control over a lot of things, we work really hard to take that control back when equipment, training, you know, acknowledging that we can do better.
Okay. I appreciate that. And that buck doesn't just stop with you, Chief. It stops over here, too. So just let you know we got your back.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So to echo what Trustee Straw said earlier, right, it seems like the difference here really is, are we talking about 6 new people or are we talking about 9 new people? I mean, that seems like a relatively small difference of opinion, truthfully, for all the information that's been presented tonight. So, you know, I guess we'll wait to see what we come back with. But those are some of the things that are on my mind in terms of how, you know, I want to make, how it would make a decision. And I am, yeah, when we okay whatever we okay, yeah, I just want to, and I know I've said it already, I just want to emphasize it again, right? Like, you know, giving money to hire 6 or 9 or 12 or 15 new people, right? If we can't actually fill those spots, right, and it's just money that's going into the reserves, truthfully. I mean, we had this situation with the police force over the last several years, right? We couldn't hire folks as fast as we sometimes were losing them, or to retirement and a number of other things, and sometimes just in general. So we often had budget for a lot more people than we were able to hire. So I think that is one of the things I'm focusing on, that because I think whatever that number needs to be, right, like I'd like to see that number actually show up and work for us. I think that might be all I had. But, I mean, where I'm standing right now is that I'm okay with somewhere between 6 and 9 new firefighters.
Very diplomatic of you. Jimmy?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, everybody. Yeah, I think it's never easy trying to figure out what the best solution is. I think we just wish we could hire everyone and, you know, call it a day, and it would take care of everything. You know, knowing my past and working with staffs, engineers, and facility workers and managing them, each having their own union, each having to deal with workers' comp, and to have to deal with, I used to work for CPS and having staff shortages, and then seeing the injuries in the workers' comp, and then seeing also that they were, you know, when I did my investigation, that there was also a lack of training, and all of these things contributed to a failed system at the end of the day, you know, and me being an outed engineer multiple occasions in many buildings because that engineer was trying to do too much by himself, not having the equipment, staffing, and I think hearing Chief Terry talk about just making sure you have all of those levels. It's not just even having all the people to do the job, do you have all the right equipment, hearing the different standards that are out there and making sure that are we just meeting the standard, or are we trying to exceed it? I know if you talk to Oak Parkers, they're really going to say they hope you're trying to exceed the standard, and I think our fire department obviously does that every day. But making sure that we're equipping them and giving them that opportunity. I think being able to see some updated stats will help. I think finding the correlation to what is actually going on with the number of staffing, the injuries in workers' comp, the overtime that goes into it, but also the level of training that goes out to the individuals that are injured as well. So we can see, are there other factors that factor into this other than just not having enough people on the day, but is that person truly prepared? And that training coordinator position that you were talking about as well, I think is huge. I think it really does save on workers' comp, but I do think having enough people and having it so that it is in a way that continues to keep everyone safe all the time and is the same consistency every day, and not wondering, okay, is it this way, or am I going to meet you there, or like, how is that going to happen? Or are you going to meet me after you go to the hospital? Like, I think just making sure there's a consistent flow, because I've never worried about it. I know when I call, like I called 911 the other day, a person passed out in their car and ended up being unconscious and needing medical assistance, and it was quick. I mean, I literally heard, I was on the phone, and then like a minute and a half, the sirens were there, you know. So understanding that there is a level of excellence that comes to it, but wanting to make sure that we are never missing a person between the cracks, because we have all of the people there. And I think everyone wants all of the bells and whistles if we can afford it. I think hearing a little bit more, getting some updated numbers. You know, I think we said that number is at the top of the top, but you're coming in at 78. So what is the actual numbers to this long term? Would love to see if we level it out. What does this look like long term? And just adding the extra data points, I think, really helped me understand, okay, how did we truly get to this? And is this a correlation of just employment? Or is it more than that? But I think we have utilized a lot of this tech, and, you know, having Chief tell us about some of this over the years, you know, explain to us this technology and life-saving, you know, the infrared technology, being able to see in these rooms, being able to do this job at a high level is great. I just want to continue to do that and figure out what's the best route to that. And I know, you know, you guys don't want to shortchange us. I know that. I know that you are only looking out for our financial forecasts and making sure that we can continue to do this, because I've seen communities that go bankrupt, and you're like, how did that happen? That's what I wonder. And I think, you know, you have to actually look at these numbers just to make sure we set everyone up for success in our community. And we set our firefighters up for safety. That's huge to me, and making sure that they can do this at a high level. And I do love all of the different aspects, because I do know, just from my job, yes, there are different standards for how these things get done. And I have a respect for seeing how we do it here and how our fire department tries to rise to that occasion every time. And I think they do, and I appreciate it. So definitely going to be looking at this additional data, but I support, what our union has put out here, but I want to make sure that I am making sure we're making the right choice fiscally for the residents too. So.
Sorry, just wanted to say I agree all with everything Trustee Enyia just said. I mean, it was an amazing comment. So 100% on that. And then a couple different things too. Trustee Taglia mentioned an engine in downtown. That seems like it makes sense to me too. I'd like to see us explore what that looks like, even if it's not something that we get to immediately. If there's a plan to get there eventually, I'd like to see what that looks like. I also think the squad sounds like a good idea to reduce wear and tear on some of our more expensive equipment, right? I think, we should also explore that. I think, honestly, it's just a lot of good information between both of these reports. But there's one thing that was mentioned tonight that I just I felt like I really need to bring up and highlight a little bit. What I heard that the adding staffing and changing the minimum manning typically doesn't result in a change to the overtime, or maybe sometimes increases it. So why do people keep changing the minimum manning when they add staffing? It seems like this is one of those things that's just, I've been in IT for a long time. Troubleshooting is what I do, right? There's two variables here. There's staff and there's minimum manning, right? Like you say, we need extra people. If you're going to bring up the minimum manning, it's not going to do anything with overtime, so don't bring up the minimum manning. Just add the staffing, right? And then maybe you actually see the overtime go down. Why don't people do that? Does that make any? Is this something that is known that I just don't know, or?
Minimum manning puts the guaranteed rigs on the street every day. So when you have injuries, when you have illnesses, you could still keep that minimum manning. So if you're going to put that engine or that squad in service, you're going to be able to keep that engine that rig on the street every single day. Another thing to take into consideration when you talk about overtime and the minimum manning, you're distributing workload. You're going to get less injuries. For people that know, things that happen with workman's comp, that's going to happen. That is going to be a natural, organic thing that's going to happen. Yeah, I know that sometimes the overtime will not be where the village wants it to be, but at the same time, if your workman's comp's going down because of it, I think that's a good thing. So, sometimes you got the yin and the yang a little bit there. So, minimum manning, like I said, it's all in terms of what the department and the village want to do when it comes to that. Right.
Right.
I think it's good to build into that. I really do. We didn't ask for a minimum manning anything when it came to the staff.
No, I know. Yeah.
I think it's important. Firemen become firemen because they want to go home on their days, right? But they're not going home right now. Right. And I can tell you that is a stressful thing. Beggar Tilly outlined it very well when it said it's fatigue, stress, all those things are real. You know, and the mental stress of not seeing your family when you have a young family. Nobody wants that. And I know everybody here doesn't want that either. So, I think when we outline it for you, it's up to you to make those decisions and what and give us what we need to allow those things to happen. So build it into it. That's a great plan. So 100%.
Yeah. I mean, it's our responsibility to protect the people who protect the village, right? And it's just, this is one of those things. So you're not asking for minimum manning, you're asking for extra staffing. We give you extra staffing. We don't change the minimum manning. Seems like overtime goes down, right? Because now you got a bigger pool of people to deploy to a shift, and those people wouldn't actually be holdovers, right? So then they would be getting paid base time, right? In addition to not in addition to decreasing overtime as a projection, it would also have all those additional benefits in terms of workman's comp, getting our folks home so they can actually be with their families, so on and so forth, better mental health, a number of things that, need to be improved based on just conversations that I've had and things that I've seen in the study. So that's, I'm sorry. No, you have, I was ranting a little bit. You go ahead.
Your prerogative.
You haven't watched these before I do this.
poor Ned has been on the line with us for about 3 hours. We had some technical difficulties, so he is here. So I would really like to ask him this question because I think it would be a better. He's got a better depth and breadth than I do on this subject.
Yeah, I would love it.
Ned, are you there? Please tell me you're there.
I'm here.
Yay! Did you hear the question?
No, if you could repeat it, it sounded like a really long question.
Yeah, so I'll summarize it, right? I heard earlier that when you add staffing, typically you increase the minimum manning, and that results in either net neutral overtime or net plus overtime. What I'm wondering is, why do folks increase minimum manning when they increase extra staffing if it doesn't, in fact, reduce overtime?
Well, it depends upon how you manage the increased staffing. If it's rigidly minimum staffing, then overtime could possibly go up. But if you give the chief some flexibility and managerial discretion to manage minimum staffing, and he's done a great assessment of your fire department, its operations, and where you are now, he would be the perfect person to be able to determine, for instance, well, I can drop down to this many people during the day, but it's absolutely required that we have the minimum staffing of 4 personnel at night when the most dangerous fires occur, when people are asleep, the reason for smoke detectors, when firefighters are most fatigued and need the extra help, it's absolutely required at night. But during the day, it might be possible for the chief to allow the numbers to drop down for a few hours, and that would have a positive impact on your overtime. For instance, if you rigidly must have 4 or 5 firefighters 24 hours a day, and some are off, they would have to be replaced 24 hours a day. But if the chief can allow some adjustment in that minimum staffing, for instance, the first 8 hours or the first 12 hours, then that would reduce some of that overtime. Instead of bringing somebody back for 24 hours, you only have to bring them back 12 or 16 hours. And so it's putting every aspect of what is done under a microscope, which is what accreditation involves. You already have an excellent ISO rating, and that's one of the highest standards that exists. The highest standard that exists for fire departments is accreditation. And the chief is very well aware of the national standards and best practices. I'm sure he's already talked about NFPA 1710 and meeting that standard, the response times, and for personnel, and the OSHA requirement for 2 in and 2 out, which is very important for firefighter safety, and that's based on IDLH, any atmosphere that's immediately dangerous to life and health. And that's the reason for the OSHA requirement for 2 firefighters in and 2 firefighters out when there is a working fire. So, but the chief has responsibility for the safety and well-being of his personnel, as well as the safety of the population in your community, but he has responsibilities to be fiscally responsible and to use taxpayer dollars in a responsible way. That requires the chief to be able to have some flexibility and managerial discretion. He doesn't want to put the firefighters at risk, but he's the best person to be able to determine when he can drop down in the numbers for a while, recognizing the most dangerous times that they experience. And the public has already recognized that. That was the reason for the creation of smoke detectors. When people are asleep and their house catches on fire, it's more hazardous and more dangerous for them
Well, your firefighters are more fatigued at that time as well. And so that's just the basic components of it. I served on the NFPA Board of Directors for 6 years that creates the national standards and got our fire department accredited. So I'm well aware of what these are. Many departments can't afford to meet them. You're almost there. And so with the chief's assessment of your organization, you're not far from meeting the highest and best standards that exist.
Great. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. So I heard again the 2 in, 2 out thing rule and from OSHA, and I did mention that earlier when I made my comments. Just wanted to emphasize too that I do think that is something that we need to strive to hit. We talked about workman's comp and keeping our people safe from that. In that perspective, it's also really important that we keep our people safe when we know, just as a matter of routine, that they got to show up to fight a fire. Right? We need 2 folks there, to be outside just in case something goes wrong inside. And I don't think that that's something that we can compromise on. I think that's all I have. Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Jenna?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll try to be brief. I really appreciate all the work that went into both of these studies. I learned a lot. Mr. Toller encouraged us to keep our priorities in mind, and I take that very seriously, and nothing is a higher priority than safety. And I think, as in particular, our firefighters, fire safety is one of the most important responsibilities we have as a board. I'm very happy that there was agreement in both presentations that the Oak Park Fire Department is excellent. I agree. And I very much appreciate Chief Terry's words a few moments ago and his leadership. I was very touched. We're very lucky to have this department serving our community. The staffing study for me was very convincing. They're not asking for anything unreasonable. It's based on safety, the safety of our community and of our firefighters. Another priority that this board has articulated is housing. We want to build more housing. We want to see a more dense Oak Park in the mid and long-term future. We'll need, safety staff, fire staff to support that vision, right? It would be irresponsible to prioritize building more densely without factoring in the safety needs, that kind of progress that we foresee in our village. We also prioritize, or we tell ourselves we prioritize equity, and it's clear that fire safety is an equity issue. Disability and age justice was mentioned. So to wrap it up, it's late. I support increasing staffing to 9 per the local 95 study. But given how hard it is to hire, I'm very interested in pursuing the suggestion recommended in the Baker-Tilly report about opening up the continuous application process. So hopefully we can pursue that in tandem with, the positions that we can hire. So again, thank you.
I just want to first note, I didn't make a motion around 4 ambulances. I made a motion last year around hiring 3 additional firefighters. I think 2 years ago, I had a motion around the 3rd ambulance, but then we did it through policy last spring. So just one clarification there.
One clarification, I actually put the 3 firefighters in the budget when I got here in 2022 to support the 3rd ambulance without a motion.
Yeah, no, right. It was a discussion around the minimum staffing to make the 3rd ambulance full time. But I just wanted to clarify, I didn't have a motion around that. But also, I wanted to go through just briefly and say, we've spent a lot of time tonight talking about the disagreement between maybe 6, maybe 9, maybe 12, but there are 26 recommendations in the Baker-Tilly report, and they are fantastic. I think the reason we haven't had much discussion around them is because there is widespread agreement around the necessity of implementing many of these things. One of the things I've been really excited about is we've got some really badass female firefighter paramedics, and we've seen some increase in diversity there over the last several years. We certainly do need to continue to increase the diversity in our fire department. So I absolutely love the recommendation around formalizing a diversity recruitment strategy. I agree with my colleagues who have spoken about us needing to be more proactive around recruitment on a year-round basis, because this gap isn't going to close itself if we don't get more active around that. I really appreciate that both the Baker-Tilly study and the local points out that we do need to move forward on the space needs assessment at Station 2. Station 2 isn't in great condition itself, and its location maybe isn't ideal for the village and how we continue to develop. So I just wanted to, we spent a lot of time nitpicking around, where there's a little bit of disagreement on staffing levels between the two studies. But I think both of the studies are in agreement on a great many things, and I think the Baker-Tilly study provides us a great blueprint for the path forward on a lot of the sort of broader management questions as we continue to move forward into the 21st century and making the Oak Park Fire Department everything that it can be and that we want it to be, because it is a great fire department, and we want to make sure it stays great, stays a destination fire department, gets back to being a destination fire department, so that we don't have staffing gaps in the future.
Okay, thank you. I don't know that there's much I can say that hasn't already been said. It is our greatest responsibility to take care of the people who make us safe. I appreciate how Jenna and others have captured that in their statement, and supporting our staff so that they have what they need. We know that we have a lot of great asks. I hear tonight that there is support for increasing staffing. I hear tonight that there is interest in understanding how ultimately we work towards reducing the overtime costs, for if it's floating people, or if it's as we work up towards those greater numbers versus instituting that manning, whether we need to look at our policies for again, I know we've got something already in place for overhiring, but what else do we need to think about in that way? And then, as Brian stated, all of the other recommendations, some of which we have not touched upon, but by accepting this report, we're asking our staff to bring further analysis. We've had the revenue enhancements that you mentioned very briefly. Overall, what I've heard in the past from my colleagues is when there can be fees that are instituted that encourage responsible behavior, then that's something to consider. If it's something that creates an additional barrier and stress on somebody in a more vulnerable situation, less inclined. But if it's also pushing for that more responsible behavior is going to take the stress off of and our staff and help us serve our community overall better. Then we also have we didn't really talk much about how we address other managerial issues that are also covered in the report, of like looking at how we address vacation time and other staffing concerns with that over time, working towards that over time, reducing it. So we have not made a motion to accept both reports, but do we wish to keep this open, or are we ready to accept both reports this evening? If so, then I'll ask for those motions. I'm sorry?
I don't, well, I don't, and I'll defer to have legal counsel help us out, but this was just a receive and file of a report.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't requesting that either of the reports necessarily be accepted. We just wanted to deliver the reports tonight.
Right, okay, I see that particularly with the motion made by Trustee Straw and Trustee Enyia for the IAFF on Local 95, but the motion for the Baker Tilly does say to receive. If that's not necessary for this evening, this was an awful lot of information to digest. It is 10:30 at night. There's probably more dialogue to be had and opportunity to, no, not tonight. Okay. Before, as we're coming for the budget season, and again, just like the last discussion, we say yes without having all of the asks in front of us at the same time, and that becomes a little bit challenging. And so, but I definitely did hear that we've got support for at least the 6. If not, understanding that we ultimately, as we continue to become a more dense community, are going to need to continue to increase that number. Just doing quick Google searches of other fire departments in communities similar in size or even not, they're fairly significantly larger. Okay, so what would you ask at this point?
At this point, we will take the feedback, and as we wrap up the budget, the draft budget, we'll present the budget. We'll also present the village's financial situation. I will say, I think that what's contemplated here, foretells some significant fiscal impact on the village. As the manager, it is my duty and obligation and responsibility to you all in the community to make sure that you are aware of those fiscal considerations and the trade-offs that come with them. There are a number of big priorities that are outstanding, things that are not funded, a police station that's under consideration where staff are actively working to try to prepare some recommendations that make sense financially for the village board to consider. There are a number of temporary staffing, ECHO included. It's a big one that's not funded yet. There are a number of other unfunded obligations that coincide with the implications around, maybe adding somewhere around $10 million to the budget. So this is a very significant consideration. I don't often speak at the end when we get to this point, but I think it's important to acknowledge it as we get ready to navigate the budget process. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunities for us to have further discussions about our fiscal situation and this particular proposal. I do just want to close by saying that there was a very important reason for trying to associate the long-term financial strategy with the analysis of the fire department operations, and to make sure that when it did come back to you, that you did have the benefit of a fiscal impact analysis. So that said, I think that, I think we'll work our way through the budget process and go from there. And the feedback was very helpful tonight, and thank you.
Yeah, there did seem to be, having some of these numbers be reliably concrete, the 125 versus what is a starting salary. I understand that salaries go up every year, and so the understanding still being that the financial impact is significant. But any any additional information that can come our way in the budget process is still gonna help us. Okay. And, so then I'm not taking a motion to receive the Baker Tilly tonight, as it's on the agenda.
No, I think a motion to receive.
Okay.
A motion to receive.
Oh, okay. Is that even necessary?
I mean, it's the request.
Okay, that's fine. It's just,
So
yeah.
moved.
So moved? And seconded by trustee Enyia. Clerk Waters, please take the roll. This was a motion to receive the fire department or organizational assessment conducted by Baker Tilly.
So moved.
Yeah, we did. It was trustee Straw and,
Okay.
and trustee Enyia.
Okay, and just to confirm, this is agenda item U.
That's correct.
Okay, trustee Straw,
Yes.
trustee Enyia,
Yes.
trustee Eater,
Yes.
trustee Loving Jacobson,
Yes.
trustee Taglia,
Yes.
trustee Wesley,
Yes.
and President Skaman.
Yes, thank you. So we do still have one more item this evening, a motion by trustee Wesley and seconded by trustee Taglia to suspend enforcement of the leaf blower ordinance temporarily. Do we have bandwidth for this discussion this evening? Can we cut this direct and short?
Yeah, I mean, my motion was pretty clear, I think, so yes.
Okay, so motion by trustee Wesley, is there a second? Oh,
Second.
yeah.
This is second by trustee Taglia.
Put it on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so trustee Wesley is motioning to hear the motion this evening, and
I'll
trustee
second that,
Eater
yeah.
is seconding hearing the motion this evening. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Wesley, you'd like to start us off?
Yeah, so, I mean, for me, this is just pretty simple, right? We have a lot of ICE enforcement in the greater Chicagoland area, including in Oak Park. The folks who are impacted most disproportionately by our leaf blower ordinance are predominantly Latino. Those are also happen to be the people who are targeted by ICE. I'd rather not send village people to also target them with citations, right? Because it's the ICE situation is not just the actions of picking people up, it's also the fear that it induces by having folks, by being profiled, right? By being racially profiled based on how you look or the language that you speak, and putting folks in a situation where they already have anxiety and giving them more when we can control not to, seems like a prudent course of action in our current times.
Okay, Derek, you want to give us the counter discussion?
I wouldn't call it a counter discussion. I think, I mean, to be honest, I agree that this is a really scary situation we're living in right now. And I thank Trustee Wesley for bringing up a concern around protecting folks operating in our village. You know, I'm the sustainability guy, so I don't like the idea of having to pit a sustainability goal against protecting folks in our village. And I'm curious to see if we can figure out tonight, maybe is there a way to address this concern in a different way, right? Like, can we provide know your rights education to some of these folks? Can we do outreach to folks, you know, and now they have to register with the village? Have we done a lot of outreach? I'm actually kind of curious. I know it's late, so but yeah, I'd be very curious to learn about what the enforcement has looked like so far. But I mean, again, as Trustee Wesley, I want to get to a place where we can do something positive here, you know, and I would prefer it if we got to a place that didn't sort of shortchange a program that's been in the works for, you know, it's been planned for and operating for 2 years. And once you say, hey, we're not going to enforce now, the thing kind of starts to crumble, you know, it falls apart, and it's hard to build that back up when we've spent significant time and effort, from what I've heard so far from staff, to make this program successful. So I guess that's just where I'm at, you know, and it's late, but maybe we could get somewhere with this.
So what have we done, Jonathan?
Yeah, please.
What have we done to engage that, our
Sure. So talked a little bit about this back in the spring, the outreach that we did in the lead up to the June 1st full ban going into effect. So, right, the additional outreach sessions that we held with landscapers, additional buyback event that we did at that time with local Ace Hardwares that involved both landscapers and residents as well. Tabling, you might have seen me out at the farmers market as part of that, as well as having our code enforcement staff especially circulating around town when they saw landscapers directly taking the time to interact with them. Since June, we had, over the summer, so June, July, and August, we had a specific property maintenance code inspector whose job it was to drive around town and look for people who were using gas-powered leaf blowers, whether they be landscapers or residents, as well as then responding on case-by-case basis when we also received complaints during that time. So between June 1 and now, we've received 86 complaints. We've issued 52 tickets because we were going for a zero tolerance approach. So if we saw you, we gave you a ticket the first time. That is not the approach that we take on most other property maintenance issues. We will typically issue a violation notice first, give you a chance to show that you're coming into compliance before we will then go about ticketing. But because of the back and forth that's happened over time, because of the phased-in approach, because we were doing a lot of this sort of outreach, not just this spring, but over the 2 years prior to that, then we're also using that approach here at the start as well. Not all those tickets were issued to landscapers. As I think Trustee Wesley specifically called out when we were here back in May, the goal was if it was on a private property owner, it was both the property owner and the landscaper who was receiving it, if that was the case. So out of those 52 tickets, 27 have been issued to property owners, 25 have been issued to landscapers. We had one circumstance where a landscaper was working across like 3 yards at once. So one ticket to the landscaper, one to each of the property owners. That's the difference in quantity there.
So again, right, like my goal here is to mitigate the impact to the landscapers. So I mean, if we stop enforcement on landscapers, it only enforced on the homeowners. That fixes my problem, right? You know, again, it's really about the atmosphere of fear that's been created by this external organization that I don't want us to play into. And so if we're not creating that or perpetuating that atmosphere by, you know, targeting, so to speak, a community that we know is predominantly Latino and know that is targeted by this other organization, to me that mitigates the issue. So
I guess I'm curious, to the best of your knowledge, how would that impact the ordinance and the compliance of it? Do you think, you know, is it really the landscaper or the building owner, or is it really the combination of both that makes this thing work? Do you have an opinion on that?
So our theory here is that it involves both on some level, but ultimately it's important to also be able to find the property owner because they're the ones who ultimately are hiring the landscaper, and that pressure is a critical part of this process as well. The ordinance as written, when you get to that final bit about who we can incite, it says property owner or person or business. So it gives us that sort of flexibility, has the or in there.
Okay. Well, I mean, so if it doesn't require any legislative change, I mean, I'm open to exploring that idea. I think that would be okay with me as long as it, sounds like it would continue to keep the ordinance in place without any change to it.
Brian?
I'm curious, when someone's going out to write a citation, what does that look like? Is it a squad car, with sirens coming, or
It's an EV.
Or is it
one of the EVs like you see at the back of the lot that has the Village of Oak Park, and so the property maintenance inspector will pull up. They'll say, "Hey, I see you doing this." They'll have a conversation. They'll take a picture so they can attach that when they're going in front of the adjudication judge to say, "Yep, we saw you at this address. You can see the house. You can see the address. You can see the person holding the gas-fired leaf blower." It's the whole bit, but it's usually a combination, right? The inspector's having a conversation with the person
when they're out there that they see using it, so that they know what's coming. So they're like, hey, we see you out here, we're going to be issuing you a ticket. Don't be surprised when your company receives this as a result, and the property owner receives this too.
So the ticket is issued by mail?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess in my mind, I don't necessarily think that I don't necessarily think that this is going to the anxiety that's created by ICE when we're talking about a Nissan Leaf like pulling up and coming out and having a conversation with somebody and saying, hey, just so you know, a ticket's going to be going to your place of business.
And then we take a picture of them.
I mean, I hear you. I guess I think that this is one of those difficult places of conflicting priorities, and I don't know that the anxiety created by enforcement around this is going to be higher than the anxiety anytime a car drives past on the street, because I would imagine there's more anxiety from seeing any kind of SUV driving down the street than a guy in khakis and an uncovered face in an EV with Village of Oak Park on the side, pulling up and taking a picture. I mean, I think it's a discussion, a conversation worth having, and if we want to, go talk about a less zero tolerance approach, and people getting out, having a conversation the first time with a business, and then saying, just so you know, in the future, if we see your business using gas-powered leaf blowers will be, that's the way I know we enforce many other ordinances of this type, then I think maybe that's an approach worth talking about. If it's someone pulling up and taking a picture, that's the thing you're flagging as creating the anxiety. It can be pulling up and having a conversation and saying, this is a priority here, and here's what it'll look like next time we see you using a gas leaf blower in Oak Park.
Yeah, I mean, I get how that sounds very innocent, unless you've ever been racially profiled and you have somebody walk up to you, and it doesn't matter what you have on, and they say, hey, this is how we do things here, right? Think about how that comes across to the person who is just trying to do their job, and they hear, hey, this is how you do things in this place, in a way that is adding to the anxiety that they're already experiencing, because, like you said, any random SUV, somebody can hop out with a mask on, right? And I would think, because I have been racially profiled before and continue to be racially profiled, that when you're in a situation where you're actively being racially profiled, such that this situation that we find ourselves in, any kind of official capacity that meets you causes that level of anxiety, that level of, oh crap, is this really Oak Park, or is this somebody else? Am I in trouble? Are they going to call someone? What's going to happen? It's not so much about the actions that we take. It's about the fear that this other organization has spent a huge amount of resources and a large amount of people to gin up, right? So when folks go outside, even if we don't show, even if they're not violating our ordinance, they're already in a state of anxiety, right? And so when we show up, and look, I have absolute trust that we show up with the best of intentions, right? Like the most non-threatening way that we can, right? Because we've had those discussions over the course of this, over the course of these discussions with this ordinance. But that doesn't matter, right? It's already the state that you find yourself in when you have to show up to work, but you don't want to show up to work because you don't know if you're going to make it home, right? And that, I don't want to add to that. And I feel like this is something we can change so that we don't. And I don't, for me, like, if we don't want to not ticket, we could just ticket the homeowner, right?
Yeah.
They're not scared.
So if you're comfortable with the suggestion of ticketing the homeowner, then this discussion can be over, right?
Absolutely.
And the ordinance actually already permits that. All it means is directing our staff that we're not interfering in any way with the actions of the workers in that moment. We're just ticketing the homeowner. I do think, though, that the fall season is going to be really tough for that population. I wonder if maybe there isn't some outreach like we've done with the contractors, as Trustee Eaters said, the Know Your Rights literature and information, because, you know, I think there's not much. And if there's any conversations we can have with landscapers to ask them what you know, just checking in with them and what resources could potentially help. I mean, I don't know, because I think it's going to be a rough season. And I don't think that this ordinance is going to really have anything to do with the fact that it's going to be a rough season. But if we're all comfortable.
Can I make a quick comment?
Oh, yes, please.
I'm certainly open to changing like how we enforce, being more careful and more sensitive. If that changes, you know, the ticketing procedure or process, I'm very open to that. I think if somebody is rightly afraid of being abducted because of this inhumane racial profiling, I am not convinced that they would risk that kind of violent abduction because there was no longer a ban on gas leaf blowers. That said, I appreciate any effort to make living and working and just being in Oak Park safer, especially for the folks who are disproportionately impacted by the violence of federal agents. And I would really like to continue to talk about the ways in which and the things that we can do as a board to protect people when it comes to, you know, outside labor, contracting, construction, landscaping. We might have to be more creative with safety patrols and reach out to homeowners and be and just be more creative with the ways in which we engage with community. I also think it's important that we legislate, we pass an ordinance similar to what Chicago Mayor Johnson passed in the form of an executive order. Evanston just passed it as an ordinance in their village, calling it like ice-free zones. So I sent an email about this that would prohibit, that they move and use any of our public spaces, signage for private properties, education materials for community members, businesses, organizations, faith groups. That includes Know Your Rights, as Trustee Eater mentioned, as well as how to document and report concerning activity. Everybody who lives in our village, everybody who works in our village should know and feel equipped and empowered to know their rights and know how to report when they're seeing concerning activity, right? And so I think we just need to do a whole lot more, and we need to be very proactive, and we need to move swiftly because it is escalating. The violence is escalating, which means the fear rightfully is escalating. And I do think just today, the Oak Park River Forest Chamber of Commerce met to organize how they can support, protect their employees, protect their customers, protect each other.
So we should support those efforts as well. I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I just want us to make sure that we're thinking like holistically about how we actually protect each other and people who visit our community.
Thank you. Agreed. I mean, some of those discussions we also need to have with our colleagues at other governmental bodies because Evanston has more reign over more land that is public property that the municipality controls versus us, but I think we can have those conversations. Okay. Okay, but so while we're moving forward with the motion that Jen already has on the table via email and literature that you've used for contractors and outreach, and the ordinance itself permits your focus on the homeowner, have we covered all of everything? Go ahead.
And so, and focusing on the homeowner, but this wouldn't still require a picture of the landscaper, would it?
So the adjudication judge will ask us to present a picture in order to get the ticket, to actually be able to write a ticket and to have it result in a fine.
Gotcha.
The adjudication judges are very clear about that. We receive many complaints from residents who will then ask us, like, hey, what can you do about this? And the answer is always like, if you're not willing to come testify to what you saw and we didn't have our employees lay their eyes on that, then it will not result in a fine.
But if we our employee laid their eyes on it, can't there just be an affidavit to that effect instead?
Yes, they might be able to do that, like with a written affidavit.
Does the photo have to have their face?
It does not, no. And it rarely does. It usually is just of an individual holding the leaf blower. It usually is not capturing the face.
Yeah.
It's often from the side or behind.
So if we can give direction to not identify the individuals, does that help, Corey?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the act of taking the photo, honestly, I feel like it's,
agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can work with the judges and see if they'll just take an affidavit from the person writing the ticket.
Yeah, so the judges will apply their independent discretion because they are neutral from staff. They're not under the control of the executive or the legislative branch of the village. So it's possible if staff presents affidavits that they'll say that's not enough and I need a photo, and I'm unwilling to find anyone liable without a photo. And so while staff can make the request, staff cannot ensure that the judges will accept the written documentation alone.
Now, how many people contest a ticket versus just pay it?
For our leaf ones, most people were coming in person to at least like have the conversation since it was new and novel.
Fair
Both
enough.
for the landscapers and the residents.
All right. Final on this? No pictures? Or a picture, how about a picture of just the leaf blower? I don't know. So someone else call the final on this one. Are we?
Yeah, I mean, if we're taking pictures, that doesn't really help to me, in my opinion. It's still kind of, it heightens that whole kind of sense. You're taking a picture of me, like, what's next? I don't know. It just doesn't feel like it's mitigating the issue that I'm trying to mitigate. So, which is one where we're not adding to the anxiety and the feeling of harassment by a predominantly Latino workforce that is already being harassed by an organization that's doing it in a much more life-threatening way than we are.
Anyone else?
If we're going to vote, can you clarify, like, if there's been an any amending to the original motion? Because the flexibility that has been discussed, I'm very comfortable with, but the original motion. So if we could just like be clear about what we might vote on.
Right, I don't think we're actually ready to vote. If there's the flexibility that we've been discussing wouldn't require a change to the ordinance as it exists, so the motion could just die. But, we're still working out the photo element. Trustee, and
Yeah.
welcomed additional
I guess
comments.
my question on the photo is, does the whole thing fall apart if we don't have documentation? Like, is this thing not,
Again, this
yeah.
is what.
yeah.
We could
It's
try
really just
it.
hard to say.
There's, right, staff can certainly move forward without providing the photo with written documentation indicating, right, when
Okay.
one of our inspectors goes out, we observed this firm, an individual from this firm at this address using a leaf blower, therefore we've written a ticket against the property owner
And they like
associated with it, but whether or not the judge at that point will take that evidence and say that's sufficient in order to assign a fine is.
I mean,
a
I'm
separate
open to
question.
trying it and just see, right? And if we find we're getting a bunch of cases enforcement's tossed out, then we can come back. But I'm open to just trying without the photo and see where that goes.
I would go with that too. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because at least you're communicating in a fairly firm way with the homeowner that this is, that we've got to change in the ordinance.
And we would, in that case, still be issuing the ticket overall, which does have that effect of communicating the importance of not violating it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. You good with that,
Works for
Corey?
me.
Okay.
Okay, so then. No pictures. And we are ticketing the homeowner only. And so now the motion on the table is to suspend enforcement of the leaf blower ordinance temporarily. So,
Can I withdraw my motion?
yes.
Okay, I withdraw my motion.
And Trustee Eater? Withdraw.
Second that?
I guess so.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Awesome.
And call to board and clerk. Clerk Waters?
Pass.
Trustee Enyia?
Just wishing, or just wanting to say, our heart goes out to all of those that are impacted and affected by what's going on nationally, but more importantly, federally. We want to make sure that our neighbors know that we're standing with them, and it's not just about our neighbors. It is about, our friends, family, those that are directly put in harm's way, individuals we know that work in our communities, that work all around us and live around us. These are individuals and families that are adversely impacted by just really ridiculous, unfair laws that are, challenging our very democracy. And I really want to make sure that individuals make sure that you're checking in with those that, are impacted or might be impacted, just to make sure that they're okay. Because I know okay is not really where most of them are at right now, but just even checking in, like I said, it really does mean a lot. And from what we've seen going to the protests, it's definitely a hard thing to swallow. I think anyone who's been there can tell you it is very hard to see just people not being able to exercise their constitutional rights. It's something that you learn as a kid about the Constitution in the 8th grade and what it stands for and what it means. You even travel to Washington, D.C., and then to see that they're violated or not being exercised in the way that, or allowing us to exercise in the way that they should be, it's a scary time. So, like I said, I just want to make sure that people know that we are there, we are hearing you, we are with you, we support you. This board has done a fantastic job of making sure that they are checking in with individuals, not just here, but wide-reaching and talking to other communities and other leaders. I feel proud to call myself an Oak Parker, knowing how much people care and are invested in making sure that we help those around us. So Just want to make sure that people know we're here with you and we're going to still continue to fight this fight. So thank you for everything everybody is doing. I know that it's seen and it's heard and it's felt.
Pass.
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 Jenna?
Terrible things are happening outside. At any time of night and day, poor helpless people are being dragged out of their homes. Families are torn apart. Men, women, and children are separated. Children come home from school to find that their parents have disappeared.
Thank you. Thank you both, Trustee Enyia and Jenna, for your comments. I appreciate the thoughtfulness of everyone who serves in this community. And we'll continue to fight the good fight here for democracy. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Have a good night.